All right, so we are diving in. This is another episode of Ichabod, but I think I'm going to start calling this will be part of a series I'm going to do called Life After Faith. And so
Hmm.
that kind of tells you from the gate what's going on here. My guest today is Elise Duprey. So welcome, Elise.
Thank you. It's
Uh,
good to be here.
well, it's great to have you. You are down where I want to be right now. You're down in the state that is my home away from home, the Sunshine State.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
but you're not from Florida. You're from where are you from?
I'm not. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so you're kind of where I wish I kind of was
Aha,
right
we could
now
swap
because I miss.
places.
I know that would be a great superpower to just
um,
kind of swap.
so I have these little like myths that I make up sometimes to try to make sense of life. Like, what if this is what's going on? And one of my
Hmm.
myths is like, what if this is all in some kind of experiment or whatever, where we all get to live everyone else's reality at least once, and we're just
Mm.
reality hopping. So one lifetime I'll be you, and then I'll be some, and so we all get to understand everyone's experience, and then based on that, we'll have a fuller sense of empathy and make a better world somewhere else. That's just a myth I play with. I might
Mm.
write a book about that one day or something.
You should, and amass, hundreds and thousands and eventually millions of followers. That'd be
I like that.
exciting.
If the
Yeah.
millions of followers equal millions of dollars, that's
Yeah.
all the more.
You'll be well taken care of.
But you're from Philadelphia.
Hmm.
Um, but I didn't know you when you were in Philadelphia.
No, but we knew the same people, a few of
We
the
knew
same
some of the same
people.
people. Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
Uh, so you went to a Bible college where
Yes.
two of the guys from the rap group that I was a part of had gone through that Bible college, and you were
Hmm.
actually there with one of them. So Ambassador went there back in the early '90s, and then Cruz Cordero went there in the late '90s or early 2000s. When were
Early
you there?
2000s. Early 2000s.
Okay.
Hmm.
So I only
Yeah.
met you after I deconverted from the Christian faith. You
Right.
sent me a message, and it was a beautiful message, just like letting me know, I wasn't alone, and that it was good to see others. Um, having the courage to come out and say the things I was saying. But you had
Right.
deconverted several years before I did.
No. No.
No,
No.
maybe
It
I'm
was around
misremembering.
the same time.
Around the
Yeah,
same
no.
time.
It was
Okay.
around the same time. Yeah, the timing of it was very, very close
So
together.
I came out with my public video January of 2022.
Hmm.
When did you deconvert from the faith?
It would have been probably close to very early 2021, maybe
Okay.
around. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So just a year or so before I did.
yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. And how long had you been a Christian prior to your deconversion?
I was a Christian for 18 years.
18.
18
That's
years.
a
It
that's a
was
lot of life.
when I turned 18 was when
Mm.
I became a Christian.
Right when you were supposed to go
When
out
I
and
got
start having
saved.
fun.
Well, I mean, I had some fun before that, but
Okay.
yes, it was short. It was the summer after I graduated from high
Mhm.
school. Um, so that's when that happened.
Uh,
And
when you say that happened, what is the that? Because there are people who are right now wanting to
right.
discount your
Well, no, I
that.
can, yeah, no, I can give so prior to becoming a Christian,
Mm.
I was in high school, senior year. I met someone. We became friends, and she invited me to church. And I laughed at her. I
Hmm.
said, "No, I could never do that," because I guess I would have labeled myself as a spiritual person, but not really
Hmm.
religious, because I grew up in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
More of like a Christmas, Easter type.
Hmm.
I went to Catholic school for a couple of years. And there were things about it that I'm like, just didn't really like a lot of the rules and didn't really
Hmm.
agree with a lot of things. And so I kind of went in a different direction.
Was God
Um,
being talked about at home? parents or anything like
Not
that?
really.
Okay.
No, no,
Okay.
not really, at all. And so I, we were, we became friends, and eventually I did go. I went to church.
Mm.
And this was at a point in my life too that I was not really sure what my next step was going to be. I was
Okay.
graduating from high school, but I didn't have any plans on going to college.
Mm.
I really like didn't know, what am I going to do with my life?
Mhm.
Like everyone else has a plan, I don't. So I show up at church and I'm expecting the walls to like come tumbling down, but
Why were
they
you
didn't.
expecting that?
Well, because I was just so kind of like a rebellious kind of
Mm.
I didn't really fall in line with my idea of what a Christian is, right? I think like,
Okay.
oh, they're just so good. Like they're just so
Mhm.
good all the time and so nice all the time. And I
Ah.
wouldn't really have labeled myself as that kind of a person
Mhm.
at that time in
Right.
my life. So yeah. But everyone was so nice. Like I get
Mm.
there and everyone's just so happy that I'm even there. Like I just show up and people are just so nice to me and like
Uh,
we're so glad that you're here. And I had such a good experience and I'm like, I could come back here. I could do
mm.
this. And then I started going to youth group because I was still, I felt in that category. So the high school youth group I went to, and I knew people from school,
Mm.
and we didn't really know each other that well. We were in different circles, but we became friends, and it was
Mm.
just a really fun um, atmosphere.
Mhm.
And fast forward to the summer, and they're going to a camp, right? And I'm like, I've
Mhm.
never been. They're like, you should come to camp. You should come to camp. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I've never done any camping whatsoever, like woods. I'm thinking, I don't know if that's really for me.
Mm.
But they were very insistent. And
Mhm.
it's like, I just don't know if I can do it. And I would have to like take off I had a job that I
Mm.
worked. And they were
Mm.
able to help with like the money situation
Mm.
and kind of all that.
Wow.
So
They really wanted you
so
at
that
camp.
was great. They really wanted me at camp. And so it's like, they
Okay.
must really, really want me
Oh.
to be there. And they did.
Mhm.
And I went and it was great. So I think it was maybe the second night that we were there was
Mm. Campfire?
it wasn't, no, it wasn't a campfire. It's a really actually a nice kind
Mhm.
of area. And the pastor, the lead pastor, I guess, one of the main people that were there, presented the gospel. And
Mm.
that was the first time that I had really been presented with the
Mm.
gospel. And I remember it was, we each had these rocks like in our hands, right? And I didn't know what the rock was for. So we were
Mm.
all holding rocks, and he talked about, gosh, I knew this a lot better then because the references. I think it's Matthew 6,
Mm.
the woman caught in adultery,
Mm.
right? And so, and he basically gave the gospel message, and I was just so moved. I felt like I had this experience of like, I felt like I was being spoken to directly. I was like,
Mhm.
this is for me, because what
Mm.
I'm hearing is God is saying, because I felt kind of like an imposter almost. I'm like, everyone here is so good. If they knew me, if they like really knew
Mhm.
me, then they wouldn't even want to be friends with me.
Mm.
And so I felt like God was saying, like, no, I see you. I see you. And yes, like you're not good, but I
Mhm.
forgive you. Like,
Mm.
and it was, even now it's so crazy because like even
Mm.
now I can feel goosebumps because of
Wow.
what it felt like, because I had
Right.
such a physical reaction. And
Mhm.
I remember him saying, like, and if if you believe this, if
Mm.
this is like your first time, like come to the front and bring your rock to the front, basically.
Mm.
And I remember the wife of the youth pastor at my church was in the front. She was one of the people up there. And I turned to my friend. I'm like, is this, because I look up and no one moved, right? So no one got up for this. And I'm like, is this the time when you're supposed to get up? And she's like, and she looks shocked. She's like, if you want to, And I was like, yeah. So I get up and I start walking over to the woman, the pastor's wife. And she just starts crying, right?
Mm.
And I'm crying, like I
Mm.
start crying, and we go out, and I remember she took me out, and we're just like crying, and she's explaining to me like about all the angels in heaven that are celebrating right now just for me, and like kind of furthering
Wow.
like the gospel message and all that. It was just like, and I had my friends coming out, and they're hugging me, and like, you know, it was just, it was amazing. It was beautiful. I just felt like euphoric almost, right? It was great. I just had this sense of relief. It was like everything just kind of made sense. And it was like, this is my new life. And so I spent the rest of that week kind of having a lot of that reinforced, and just like, you know, like this is what you should be reading, and this and this and that. It was interesting too, because I remember I was dating someone at the time who, you know, I had left there, and and it was not a very long relationship, I guess. But I remember they were like, well, like he's not a Christian. So when you go back, you have to break up with him. And I remember thinking, oh, like, wow, like that's a bit harsh, but like if this is what I have to do, then I guess I have to do that. And also, but what was also interesting, and I told you about this, that there was a pastor there. He was a youth pastor, but he went to a different church. But he was friends with the youth pastor at my church, and he was interested in me. Okay. So I was a camper, and he was a counselor. Okay. So he was a
How
bit
many years older than? Yeah.
I want to say like 7 or 8. I don't even quite remember at the time, but what I did receive was kind of a positive affirmation of, this is good. And like there were other people that were excited, like, oh my gosh, like this is great for you. Like you just became a Christian, and already you have found like someone who's probably going to be your husband. And like, yes. But for me, I'm like, okay, I guess this is, because they were so happy about it. And when I talk about these people, right, in my life, there were things that I can look back on now and say like, that really wasn't a great thing for me to do. But they were all very well-meaning, because it's really the culture itself that is just kind of just backward, like this isn't
cultish.
how it should be.
It's cultish.
Yes, it is very, very cultish, which I know people are kind of screaming at. But if you look at what a cult is, and also the reason why people join cults, there's no other. It's just one of the most widely accepted, right? The only difference is like when you even read different definitions, it's like, well, it's not a widely accepted. This one just happens to be widely accepted. Most people don't.
It plays by the same rules as every other cult. Yeah, good point.
They're, you know, they promote an illusion of comfort, you know, like they give people a purpose. Most people in cults don't realize that they're even in a cult.
There's an in group and an out group.
Yes, there's an us
you've got to
versus
break
them,
up with your boyfriend
us
because he's
versus
not
them
in the in group
mentality. Exactly. Yeah. But it was like for my own, like that's just how it had to be. Like that is what this is supposed to be like, what it's supposed to look like.
Can we go back for a second?
Yes, we can.
Because I think it'll really help people. I love the way that you articulate things. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. So I'm going to ask you to, even if it's on the spot, maybe to try to articulate something, because I think it'll be helpful.
Sure.
You were talking about your conversion, feeling the weight, to put it in Christian language, feeling the weight of your sin. That's what I thought The Rock was going to be. But The Rock in that story was,
well, like you threw it
judgment.
down.
Right.
Right.
God's not going to judge you for your sin, because I guess he already judged Jesus for your sin. He's going to forgive you. So that whole experience of knowing that God's accepting you despite your sin, and I'm sorry, I'm only asking because you didn't tie it in, and there may be somebody waiting to see if you caught that part of it. Did you attach Jesus to the reason why God is accepting you, even with your sin in that story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How did that hit your conscience, or how were you made aware of that?
Well, It was, I mean, just the way like he presented, because Jesus was the one that was forgiving this woman. And so
Okay.
I really believed like
Mm.
Jesus is speaking to me
Mm.
through this, like this message is for
Wow.
me.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it was so, and it was almost like there was nothing else. Like I could pretty much close out the rest of the
Mm.
room. And it felt like I've just felt this direct, like
Mm.
he is directing this to
Right.
me. Like this is all
Mm. Yeah.
like to me. Like,
Your sins were
and then
very
especially
real and
because
going to
I
be
was,
forgiven that night.
yes, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And I felt that. I felt,
Mm.
like you said, the weight of it just
Mm-hmm.
completely lifted.
Mm.
I was like the first one to walk up, and there were hundreds of people, okay, walk up to the front,
Mm.
which is something most people that know me, I'm not going to be walking up to the front of anything for people. Like, I think there
Right.
are people that are going to be shocked that they're even going to see my face on here
Well,
because,
just so people know, I asked you to do this a year ago, and you said a
yeah,
year ago that you weren't ready. So you weren't rushing to the front of
yeah,
this, nor were you rushing to the front of anything else until something that
yes,
mattered that much to you.
yes. So
Hmm.
that's right. You did.
Okay. Well,
I was going to
so
say, yeah, and I said yes, but you were like, no, you didn't.
um,
I got receipts.
but someone just switched gears because before they were looking at you wanting to discount your testimony. She didn't feel the weight of her sin. She didn't really meet the Savior. She didn't da 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 da.
Mhm.
Da. Now that you testify that you did have that experience, now someone's trying
And
to
it
find
wasn't
out.
my only
Okay,
experience.
okay, so we got to
Yeah.
talk about that. But something
Yeah.
you said a minute ago, you said even now, just talking about it, you could feel the
Mhm.
goosebumps raising.
Mhm.
So the person that just switched sides, who said you weren't a Christian before, now they're like, okay, well then maybe she still is, and she's just rebellious because if not, why would you still be feeling goosebumps? Could you explain why
Yeah.
still goosebumps?
Well, because what I know now, which I didn't understand then, is that our brains
Mm-hmm.
are amazing, right?
Mm,
Like we can convince ourselves that like we can think back to different experiences. We can smell something, right? We can
mm-hmm.
have just the way that our brains think about things and the way that we process. We can feel things that aren't even there.
Mm-hmm.
We see. I mentioned that show Brain Games to you
Mm-hmm.
before, right? Have you? You probably have.
No, no.
There's, but it's interesting. This kind of isn't exactly, but there's one they do like a rubber hand kind of thing where he puts a mirror and it's like a fake hand and then he brushes both hands, like your hand and this rubber one at the same time so that you kind
Mm.
of your brain connects the
Mm.
two, and then he comes out with like a hammer and then like slams down the rubber hand and people are like, and a lot of
Mm.
people, most people will feel some sort of sensation. They feel a
Mm.
sensation by this person hitting something that is not any part of their body, but their
Wow.
brain
They've
has
associated.
already made the connection that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so they feel that pain, even though
Mm-hmm.
their hand is perfectly fine on the other side of the mirror. So
Mm.
that would be my answer
So
is
recalling
my
that
brain.
story, yeah.
Yeah, I think because my brain is so it remembers it. I still feel it because the memory. I would say it's a core memory, right? It's a
Mm.
core memory, and it's something that I have shared so many times. This was my testimony, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have shared it verbally with people. I've written it out because when you have to do like mission trips and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I applied at PBU, like this is all part of
Mm.
like you're sharing your testimony. That was a
Yeah.
big part of my testimony was this huge conversion that I had
Mm-hmm.
and I immediately felt like I was changed. I was a different person.
Mm.
Um, I had a different, like, this is the direction. Like I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
any direction before. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life,
Mm.
but now I do. I
Mm.
have a purpose now. I
Wow.
have direction. I have this community of people
Mm.
that really care about me.
Right.
And I do believe that is true. I'm not saying that, well, that
Mm.
was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Still, I mean, some of my favorite people on the
Mm-hmm.
planet love Jesus. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they still do. So from that, I go back
Mhm.
from camp, break up with my boyfriend
Mm.
because like that's it. Like he went to pick me up from the church, Brady. Like he was there smiling, happy. And I look, and the
Have
women
I
of the
got
church,
news for
like
you?
there are a few women who are like hype, like they're like, we've got you, we're here for you, like you
Mhm.
can do it. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
Mm.
And it was also, and I felt looking back, it's like I feel horrible because not only was that, but there was also this other person already
Mm.
involved. Okay. So there
Wow.
was another person that had mentioned to him, hey, and there's this other guy
Mm.
like that she met who, made his
Mm.
intentions very clear at the time.
Oh, somebody
Um,
told the guy that you broke up with that there's
yeah,
somebody
right
else in the picture.
before. Yes, I know. So drama right out the gate. Um, and so, I mean, from that, I started, um, it was very soon after, I want to say like a week or two after that, I was invited, to kind of come help out at the junior high youth group at the church. And so I said, okay, sure.
Mm.
And I did that day. And I was there like for years. Like I
Mm.
started helping immediately. I was serving in that capacity. I was one of the
Mhm.
leaders for the junior high youth group.
Mm.
I started doing Bible studies. Which eventually I started leading some,
Mm.
and it was very intense. But also, I was started to like plan a wedding. Like I
Mm.
started planning a
With
wedding
the guy?
with the guy. Yeah, very
Oh,
shortly
okay.
after. So this was in, yeah, so let me think. It was in the summer, and then we started corresponding,
Mhm.
and we were dating. And he did also make it like we were courting. Like this
Okay.
was like he intended. So
Mhm.
our wedding was
Mm.
supposed to be in the spring. It was it was May. I think it
The
was
very
about
next
around May.
spring after the summer camp.
Yes. So
Wow.
not a full year. So
Okay.
it was going to be in the
And I've got
spring.
to
He lived
ask.
in a different state. Hmm.
I've got to ask. Were you into him, or how much of your attraction was a? It almost makes me think of almost like sexual harassment at a job, where someone's got like authority over you and they're interested in you. Like this, the balance of power is off. How
Um,
much of your interest
yeah,
or
it's so
being with him
interesting for
was?
you to say that because I certainly wouldn't have viewed it as that at the time
Mhm.
because um, I don't know. Like it's weird. We didn't have a lot in common. All
Mhm.
right. He was attractive.
Mhm.
Um, but I also I'm like, well, if they say he's a great catch, right? If everyone else
Mhm.
is so happy and they're like, this is great, like he
Mhm.
was a youth pastor, like what more, like everything was falling into place for me, right?
Mhm.
And it just seemed like that was the right thing to do. And I really put a lot of stock into what the older women of
Mhm.
the church who were
Wow.
married, they had kids, like they were these
Mhm.
godly women. And if they
Mhm.
were telling me that this was good for me and this was the right thing
Mhm.
to do, again, very well intended. I
Mhm.
want to just really emphasize that,
Mhm.
um, because I don't want anyone to think like that. Oh, I can't believe they said this or they said that. They
Mhm.
truly believed that. They
Mhm.
believed that that was the best thing for me.
Mhm.
Um, even if I can look back and realize, well, it wasn't. And I knew it at the time too, eventually. Like as time went
Was there
on,
any pressure, not pressure, was there any thought from them or in your mind that this was not just a good thing for you, but this was God's will for you?
oh yeah, yeah. No, it was a lot of the
Well, see,
language surrounding it was God provided this person, right? This is what God has for you. Like
yeah,
God brought, it was almost like, I can't believe God like is setting
right,
all
right.
this up,
And here's, I don't
but
know
in
if this is,
motion in a way.
tell me if you think this is what's going on, because I'm trying to get you to use language that you would not use today that was probably being used back then. So when you're saying
Right.
this is a good thing, I'm like,
Yes.
but what were you guys saying then? It was a God thing at that
Understood.
point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This
Okay.
was the man that God had for me.
Mm.
Um, and so as time went on, because he lived in a different state. like far away enough where we weren't seeing each other like that often. And I would visit him, he would visit. But as time went on, as we got closer to the date, it was kind of like, and I remember when he proposed, and it was just, I didn't really have like an emotional reaction. And I thought, well, it's just, I kind of would always revert back like, oh, I'm just like, I just have a hard time with emotions. Cause I kind of do. Like my first instinct is to like, just shut everything down. Like I just shut everything down and don't react. That's my, like, just don't react. And so I thought, oh, I'm just like so overwhelmed with emotion probably that I'm like, I'm shutting down.
Right.
I'm so like,
I'm so happy.
I'm so happy that I'm just going to freeze like a possum, like just play dead. But I started to realize I did not want to be married to this person. And I didn't know how to, I just felt like, well, I can't back out now. Like everyone's going to be so disappointed. And they were just like, it just wasn't a good fit. We weren't a good match. Like when it came down to it, we were not a good match. And that was it. Okay. There wasn't anything that I could say, well, he was this, that, and the other. It wasn't like that at all. It was just, we weren't a good match. I didn't feel ready. Like, I just felt like, I just don't know if, cause I was 18, 19, like I would have been 19 for the wedding. And I still just felt a little too young, and I didn't feel ready to leave my family because the plan was for me to move down where he was. Okay. And it was just all too much. I was like, I don't really want to do all that. And so we ended up not. There's a lot of other drama that, it's unnecessary to address right now. And so we didn't do that. And so that was, I don't know, March. We'll just say March of, this would have been 2004. I got saved in like July of 2003. And so my next plan was to learn as much as I could about the Bible. So what would be the best way to do that? Hey, I'm going to go to Philadelphia Biblical University. So I enrolled, and I started that August of 2004. Okay. And I was a student, and just like that. And so I was kind of thrown into it. And just like, I loved it. It was great. It was like, there were so many people. They were so smart. Everyone knew so much about the Bible. I remember my Old Testament history, like professor saying, okay, we're going to read through all the, the Old Testament and just like pretend as if you're hearing it for the first time. I want like fresh ears, fresh eye. Like and I'm in my head and I'm just like, this is the first time. Like, I am hearing all of these stories for the first time. And it was like, it was exciting for me, but then there's also a lot of where I just felt like I'm so far behind. I have so much to learn. So I really, not only did I feel like a student and like I had professors, but all the people around me, like the people that I met. And I mentioned this about Cruz too. And Derek, Derek. And I would love to just sit there at lunch and whatever meal and just listen. And I'm like, literally, I just felt like I was kind of sitting at the feet of these people who just knew so much. Were just, they knew the Bible. They were filled with the Spirit. Like they just like, they're quoting scriptures. And I'm just like, oh, like I want to be like, that's how I want to be. I want to be able to know, and just to be able to, because that was still at the point in my life where I'm like trying to do the right thing, but I'm still very new in my faith. So there's a lot of
Had a heavy prayer life?
No, not yet. Okay. No,
Okay.
Not at that point. That came later. But at the time, it was just, I wanted to soak up as
Mm-hmm.
much as I could. I wanted to learn. I wanted to surround myself. I just kind of dove into
Mm-hmm.
like surrounding myself with people that believed the same things that I believed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. And for financial reasons, I didn't go back right away after the first year, but I made a lot of connections. I did end up going back eventually, but I remember even just with dating, it was really interesting because there it was very common for people to
Mm-hmm.
date to marry, right? The whole ring by spring. Um, and and a part of me was just like, I don't really want that. What I loved the most about it were meeting other like the young ladies, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
were freshmen, and just having relationships with other women of God who,
Were you discipling them?
no, they were discipling me probably more than
Okay.
anything.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. We
Mm.
were friends though. It felt like we were
Mm-hmm.
just like, we
Yeah.
wanted the same things, right? We
Mm-hmm.
wanted to grow and learn. We wanted to be godly women. We wanted
Mm-hmm.
eventually to marry godly men. Like that's what
Mm-hmm.
we wanted in our lives.
Okay.
And so just to be around other people that have the same mindset, the same goals,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I didn't really. I thought maybe I'm never gonna get married, even though I was still young, because no one was really like interested in me at PBU. It was like
Mm-hmm.
a kind of a. There were a few things here and there. It was a weird situation.
Mm-hmm.
I won't get into it, but um, I did eventually leave. So during this time, I'm still helping with the youth group. I'm still doing that. Um, so I ended up leaving PBU for a period of time, and I'm just working, like just kind of working, doing different things, and still doing women's Bible studies. I think even at that point, I was leading a few women's Bible studies at my church. And I really just fell into a lot of leadership roles, which I'm not really even sure how that happened, but it just kind of did.
Mm-hmm.
And I I did eventually get the attention of someone who was a leader at the church that I was. And again, there was a woman of the church who I was close to, who was encouraging me in that direction of, this person would be great for you. Like, you guys are so great for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember thinking at the time, but he was much older. Let's say I don't remember exactly the years. Let's just say anywhere from 15 to 20. And,
Mm-hmm. Wow.
and I felt like, I don't think that would be a great fit.
Did you
And
have flashbacks from the last time they tried to put you together with a church leader?
no, I didn't, because I still at that point, like, am still very much valuing, right? I valued their input and what they had to say and their opinions. But I just felt, in my mind, I'm like, I just don't think that we are a good fit. I don't see what they see. And my friends who are more my age were like, no, like, I don't
Okay.
think that's. So I did have other people that were like, no, I don't think, like, I don't think that's a good fit for you. But there was a lot of pressure because he was a leader, right? Like a significant leader in this church.
This is spiritual sexual harassment.
And so the interesting thing was, and he really is a great guy. Like, I think people are probably going to know who I'm talking about that knew me at the time. But it was a lot of pressure, and he had showed up a few times to my job to say like, oh, and just kind of like, oh, when do you have a break? We would kind of talk and stuff. I think it was like one or twice, 2 times, but I remember just feeling a lot of pressure at the time of like, oh my God, he showed up. I wouldn't have said, oh my God, by the way. Oh my word. Oh my word. He showed up. like, of course I'm not going to say like, no, like I'm going to spend my break not with you. It's like,
He showed up
okay,
uninvited.
yeah, completely. Like he just
Hmm.
happened to be there. I don't know if he had asked ahead of time, like, what's your schedule? I don't even know. I don't remember because it was so long
Hmm.
ago. But I did not invite
Hmm.
him there to
Okay.
come. It was, he just knew like that's where I worked at the mall. Like I was in a
Hmm.
store, like at the mall. And so,
Hmm.
and so I just felt like yeah, I think a part of me did feel like, well, I'm not going to say no,
Hmm.
but it wasn't. So at around that same time was when I ended up meeting someone else who I did eventually marry. Okay.
Hmm.
So, and this was a time that I had dated. I had went on quite a few dates,
Hmm.
and with a few people that I actually got along really well with. The issue was that those people were not believers. So I would
Hmm.
say that maybe half, let's just say 50-50 of people that I was going on first dates with, there were very few second because they didn't
Hmm.
check the necessary box.
Hmm.
It was like, okay, like we have so many things in common and we get along really well. This person's a great guy, but
Hmm.
he's not like, I shouldn't even, and just the guilt of, I can't believe I went out on a date with someone and he's not even this,
Hmm.
but you want to like make sure and just kind of like, well, where are
Hmm.
you? Like, are you
Hmm.
close? Ask that, but it's like, how can we make this
Hmm.
work?
Right.
Because this is very important. Because from the
Hmm.
very beginning, right? Even week one of my conversion was, this is
He's
the
not a
most
Christian.
important thing. Like,
Yeah.
this is the most important thing,
Hmm.
right? Was making sure that having a godly husband
Hmm.
is like there, that's the most important thing. And
Hmm.
so
Wow.
I guess, okay. I guess it's difficult to talk about meeting my, who ended up being my husband, without kind of getting into a little bit more about what, like, it wasn't just the pastor kind
Hmm.
of, because I met him online.
Hmm.
So, and it was kind of on a whim, right? It was on a whim. It was during a time that there were issues going on in different friend groups of mine,
Hmm.
drama, all this stuff. So it was a time that I was starting to feel a bit isolated for the first time since
From
joining.
from the church.
Yes. Well, at
Okay.
that point, I didn't really have friends who were
Hmm.
not in the church. Like,
Okay.
that's just kind of how there was a huge shift for
Hmm.
me. And because this would have been oh 07 at that point. But
What do you mean 7?
2007.
Okay,
Like
gotcha.
this would have been that time frame. So
Hmm.
by then, pretty much all my friends were other
Hmm.
Christians. Um, as it should have been, right? Because you want to be around people that can encourage you, that
Hmm.
can lift you up, that can
Hmm.
kind of support you. Um, because it's a very slippery slope to be around people who aren't, because they can bring you down.
Oh,
So
but
that's why
Jesus, he
you
he
have to.
spent time with sinners and
Jesus is perfect, though. He's not a sinner. We are, but full of
Hmm.
sin. Like, so we
Okay.
can't be around other sinners.
Hmm.
We're not
Hmm.
perfect.
Hmm.
Jesus was perfect. He was
Okay.
sinless. We
Hmm.
are, I
Yeah.
mean, just like drip drenched. We're born of,
Like alcoholics going to the bar.
it's just, yeah, you just don't do that.
Okay.
So, and this kind of goes into, which I'm sure maybe we'll kind of touch on, just, I'm trying to, I don't know how to, this is something that I haven't shared with you.
Okay.
And so this is probably why you're like, what is
Yeah.
the, um, because it's something that I think is relevant, but it's
Hmm.
something that I've only recently talked about and shared. And it
Hmm.
also touches on just how our brains are kind of amazing.
Hmm.
And so I had, I don't even know an experience, I'll
Hmm.
say, where I met someone So, and I had told him this just recently, but before I met my husband online, I met someone else, and we had went out, I think a few times. I don't really remember much about this person, but um, there was an assault that took place, basically. So I was sexually assaulted by this person. And it was really traumatic at the time, but I remember afterwards thinking, I can never tell anyone about this. Like, no one can ever know, because I felt just the shame and the guilt of it, because like I put myself in this position. I met this person, on this type of platform. And like it was, and what a lot of people go through that have been through that, a lot of the similar thoughts. It's like just, and especially because, and I would say that the purity culture, which we've talked about, really feeds into that, right? Of just like feeling just so unclean and just like, so I decided at the time, like, I'm just not going to ever talk about this, and no one will ever know. And I'm just going to shut it off. Like, I'm just going to pretend like this just didn't happen. But I think as a result, I did feel especially, I guess, just kind of unsafe at the time. And so very shortly after that was when I met my husband. And so we met and we got along really, like, there are a lot of things that we didn't have in common. But I also felt very strongly, because this wasn't the first time. I was dating someone briefly, and I remember just hearing a voice saying, he's not the one, right? And I perceived that, like, I'm like, God is telling me this person's not the one. So I like broke up with them immediately, because God told me, like, this person is not the one for me. And I had all sorts of experiences like that, where I truly believe, like, God is telling me something, and so this is what I have to do. So before I even met my husband face to face, I was like, I really believe, like, God is saying that this is your husband. And I remember talking to other people, and they're like, like people who are married in the church, like when you just know, and God's going to bring someone in your life who, like, on paper, it's not going to make sense, but it doesn't have to, because it's going to make sense to God. Okay. So it's going to make sense to him. And like, that's how you know, like, when you're looking and you're like, I would have never put this together. Like, I wouldn't have chosen this person. That's how you know.
That's how you know it's God.
That's how you know that that's the person that God has for you. So I'm kind of looking, I'm like, okay, so this person is not, like, he's just kind of reading through the interests and things. I'm like, I wouldn't have picked this person, but this is who God has for me then, because, it's not someone I would pick.
Now I'm curious, what would be different about the first youth leader who you wouldn't have picked, the second one you wouldn't have picked, if the person you ended up marrying you wouldn't have picked? What would make this one more God's voice than the other?
Right. I think I had gotten to the point in my life, especially after what had happened, that I felt like it was time, because I had other people who were also like, well, someone actually said to me, what's wrong with you? You have these people, like, it's not that people don't want to marry you. So, because I had other friends and stuff, and they were just like hoping that someone would want to date them, let alone marry them. Like, well, you have options. Like, why are you, like, what's wrong with you? What is wrong with you that none of these options, are good enough, kind of a thing? When really it was just about me not feeling ready.
Right.
And so there was pressure. And at that time, I'm like a whopping 22, right? So
You're
like
an old maid.
I'm getting up there. And I was like, gosh, like I should have been engaged a year ago. Um, so I felt
Hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
pressure from on
Yeah.
that end of like, well, what am I doing?
Hmm.
Because a part of me thought,
Hmm.
I thought, I think God is calling me to be single. So right
Hmm.
before I met him, I actually believed that. There was a part of me for a period of time that thought, and I was excited about it too. I'm like, I think God just wants
Hmm.
me to be single. Like, I think this is the life that I'm being called to. And I remember speaking to someone that I trusted who, was very
Hmm.
knowledgeable. And it was like, well, if God is calling you to be single, then you also will basically you don't have like any feelings of like any sexual desire or attraction.
Hmm.
Like that also is
Hmm.
removed. And I was like, oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Because I was like, okay, so he hasn't taken that. If that's an important thing for him to take
Hmm.
away,
Hmm.
and I still have that,
Hmm.
um, then maybe I am supposed to get married and be
Hmm.
married.
Now, you're thinking that God may be calling you to be single. Was it
Mhm.
attached to so that you could do more ministry or
Yes, of
serve Him?
course, because
Okay.
like it was like God wants me all to Himself.
Mm.
Because you look at people like Paul, right?
Hmm.
Just think about what I could be doing
Right.
for Christ out there in the world, untethered, right?
Yeah.
Um, like so yeah, so that was part of the excitement was
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
like this is
I
what
wanted to
God
make
is
sure we
calling me
named
to
that for the
do.
person who's watching.
It just like I just this is what
Hmm.
God is calling me to do. This is a path that He has for me, and it was just really
Mm.
exciting because I thought
Okay.
maybe that's why
Hmm.
I haven't had a desire to be
Hmm.
married. Maybe it's
Mm.
because this is what He has
Yeah.
for me instead, and it felt very like special,
Hmm.
like oh, like thanks. Um, but then that wasn't the case because I'm like, well, I just don't
Mm.
know if I don't know if I can go my whole life without.
Mhm. Mm.
And, you know, that just, I felt like that would have been an important part. And I wanted children. I knew that I wanted to
Mhm.
be a mom.
Mhm.
And I wasn't sure how that would kind of play into everything. And so when I met him, I had kind of already gone into it like, this is going to be my husband.
Mm.
I remember even calling a guy at the time that I had gone out on a few dates with, and we got along great. He was a really sweet guy, but he wasn't. He was, he kind of went to church, but he wasn't really like. He wouldn't call himself like a born again believer.
Mhm.
And so I called him. I said, "Hey," um, actually said like, "I haven't met this person yet, but I really believe that this is who God
Mm.
has for me, and so I can't see you anymore."
Mm.
And that was the end of that. And this was before I went out on, because I felt like, well, I need to end things with this person
Wow.
cleanly before going out on a first date with this person that I have not met yet. But this is like who God has for me, most likely.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
and so we went out on our first
Mm.
date, and I immediately thought, like, I just don't know about this because it just felt like
Mm.
it just seemed so different. Um, but he made me laugh like the whole time. We had so
Mm.
much fun. And that's if I had to pick like one thing, like everyone like has different ideas. I've had even just someone the other day, like, oh, I think I know your type. You don't. I don't have like a type. Is it like people think that I have a
Right.
physical type? It's like,
Mhm.
no, it's really just if you're funny. Like
Mm.
that's kind of just step one. If you can make
Mm.
me laugh, we're good. So he made me laugh a lot. And but I didn't think we were going to go out again. I thought this was
Mm.
great. We're not going to have a second date.
So did you tell yourself you
So
misheard God?
it was just like this. There was a miscommunication.
Mm.
But that was short lived. It was short
Mhm.
lived because we went out again, and it was just like okay, yeah. And so I thought.
Mm.
So it was our third date that we sat down and we're sitting like in a restaurant, and he starts asking me questions, and basically was kind of getting around this whole like, is this leading towards marriage? Yes or no, kind of a thing, like third date. Like, do you want to get married, basically? And I remember at the time, my gut was saying, leave, go, just leave, go. But I was like, no, because what I believed for many years, Brady, was when my gut was telling me something,
Lean not to your own understanding.
Yes. Well, that was my fleshly part of me resisting the Holy Spirit. So when I felt something in my gut, it was like, I am resisting the Holy Spirit right now. Don't do that. So there were a lot of times that I would have like this gut feeling, and I'm like, I'm being so stubborn right now. Like, I'm being so stubborn.
I wasn't going to ask, but since you said that, I'll go back. And if you don't want to answer this, it's fine. I can edit it out. But I'm wondering if that plays into how you would answer this question at all. If you go out on a date with someone from online dating, you get assaulted. You don't feel safe. I'm sure there's somebody who's wondering, so then why would you go back onto that same website and go out with anyone else? How did you survive that experience to the point where you were willing to do that again?
Because it didn't happen. Because in my head, it was already done.
You blacked it out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And and it wasn't the first time that I had blacked things out. And that's just, and I know that there are people who are going to be watching and listening like, that doesn't make any sense. But I also know that there are going to be a lot of people who can really relate to that and who are like, yeah, that does happen. It does happen.
Okay.
And you kind of like force something, you put it in a box and you shove it aside, and it just doesn't exist anymore. And that's what I did. And I just kind of put it over here. And honestly, I hadn't even remembered that until this past year, I would say, maybe even less, when kind of talking and kind of going through things with very close friends of mine and kind of unpacking a lot of what I've been going through over the past year. And it was like, I completely forgot about that.
Let this be a lesson to anybody who would watch. And if you've ever asked the question, why is this woman just coming out saying this now? How come, this, she sat on this for 20 years, or why didn't, if you haven't had the experience, you can't say what a quote unquote normal person would do in that situation.
And I remember even thinking, and I heard about similar experiences, or I remember hearing women at PBU telling about basically sharing their stories of being sexually assaulted. None of them reported it. And I remember thinking at the time, why, like, how could something like that happen to you and then you don't say anything? Like, why are we even talking about it right now? Like, you should have gone to the police. Like, it just was so black and white in my mind, where I remember hearing people sharing and thinking, okay, but like, you didn't even report it. So how bad could it have been? Like, I actually had that thought, and now I'm like ashamed that to even admit that I thought that about someone's story. But it wasn't until afterwards where I realized, oh, that's why. Like, I get it now. And it's, and it's sad that there are so many young women.
And you said
that
you were at PBU. PBU was Philadelphia Biblical University, the Bible college where you met Cruz Cordero and all that. And you said there's multiple women there, students, talking about having been assaulted. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to further say, that have been assaulted, and these have never been reported. So,
wow.
It's more common than I think we'd like to admit, especially in the church. But that also, because of how much shame is involved. I think, we can.
Yeah, the only reason why I even asked the question in the first place is because I was wondering if you might say you went back onto the website because you were listening to God telling you were going to go meet your husband there, and something like that. But that wasn't what got you back on.
No, it was
Okay.
just like, it really was
Mhm.
kind of just, that was it. That was
Okay.
it.
All right. So you go out again. You changed your mind, like, oh, maybe
I
I did
thought
hear God
maybe
right.
not, because it was just, I just thought, I don't know. And I can't really say all the reasons because
Mm-hmm.
it would probably be embarrassing for him. That's the last thing I would want to do. He knows. He
Mm-hmm.
knows kind of all the things, and we laugh about it. But I just thought, well, no, I don't think he wants to get married. Like, I don't think for me, it was like, I don't think I'm what this person is looking for, basically. So I was kind of like not really sure. And then, like I said, that was very short lived. We went
Mm-hmm.
out again shortly after and got a lot of deep conversations, a lot of deep spiritual talks. And then on the third date was when we talked about, getting married. And it was just like really intense for me. And
He was the kind of Christian that you could date without thinking, I won't be unequally yoked.
I definitely knew like this person is on fire for the Lord. Like he was
Okay.
so excited, and he
Mm-hmm.
was a newer believer, but we were
Mm-hmm.
still newish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of his excitement was very attractive. Like he just like really wanted to be this godly man, and he was going to learn how to do this. Like it was something that was very
Mm-hmm.
important to him. Whereas a few of the other people, it was like just kind of, and I think a part of me didn't feel entirely qualified to be the wife of the one
Mm-hmm.
particular person that was much older in my church. Because I just remember thinking, but why would he want me? Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've only been like, he's this, very strong Christian leader. I'm not, like, I still have so much to learn. I have a ways to go because I felt like I hadn't quite hit my stride yet. Um, so in my mind, I'm like, I don't like, what does he even want with me? Like, maybe he should get out. Like, I'm just me. Like, I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
knowledgeable enough. Like, I just felt like, um, yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
But so fast forward. So I think our first date was like early June-ish or something. I'm not even sure. But we ended up getting married that following fall. So we were together
Okay.
for just over a year.
Okay.
But we started planning the wedding
Mm.
like maybe September-ish.
Hmm.
So this is a few months after we
Few
made.
months in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So for the bulk of our relationship before getting married, we were planning a wedding. Okay. Instead of just really, hey, let's just like take this first year and just get to know each other. But we also had just had it in our heads like, well, this is what God has for us. Why wait? We already know that like we're each other's person, because we believed that there were the people, like in the one at the time. So that was our focus. Our focus was the wedding and getting married, and kind of the steps kind of going along with that. And so we got married. Right before that, though, I ended up going back to PBU. So I went back, engaged basically, and planning my wedding right after I went on a missions trip that was very, quite a spiritual experience for me. I went to West Africa right before starting up at PBU again. So it was just like, I was just so filled with the Spirit and just on fire. And it was like just kind of different the second time around going back. Because I'm like, I know more now. Like I'm more on fire. And I just kind of dove in and I did better in my classes because I wasn't that great my freshman year because, like I said, I was hearing all that stuff for the first time. So I didn't even know, like, just even trying to memorize like certain language and
Mm.
like, what does even apologetics mean?
Mm.
Because it was just kind of like, that was one of the words that one of the guys would say over and apologetics, this about. I'm like, I gotta, like, not go, you didn't say it at that time. I need
Right.
to like learn what this means. I'm too embarrassed to ask.
Mm.
You keep talking about apologetics. What is that? Like, what does that mean? So there was just a lot that I just didn't know. And
Mm.
so I felt ready. I felt like I went back. And it was great. I got married. And I continued to get my degree. I went for social work.
Okay.
And then I felt like God was saying that it was time to start having children. And so, and I remember we were like, well, let's try to plan it for this time. And then I got cold feet and I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't think we should do this. And so there was a period where.
Hold on, let me ask this question real quick.
Okay.
So at some point we're going to get to a deconversion.
Yes.
But in all this time, had there been any doubt, any questions, any?
Oh, no. No, it was only stronger and stronger faith. And there was a lot that was just kind of reinforcing this. So the whole thing with the baby. My husband is deployed at the time. I'm feeling like, I think when he comes back, we should start a family, even though I was still in school. And I remember going to one of my professors who was also a pastor and sitting with him and sharing this with him. And he prayed over me, right, about it. I'm walking out to my car and I get a call from my husband who's deployed, who the timing, it's like, that's not even the time when he normally would call. And he says, you know what? I was thinking, I think when I get back, we should start trying to have. So I'm like, wow,
God
that
just
worked
answered your prayer
instantly. It was instantly, right? So that was not a coincidence, right? There's no way that could have been a coincidence. That was God answering a
No
prayer.
way.
And I'm like, I'm going to go to this person all the time to pray like for me. And I actually, there were other times where I'm like going to this professor.
He gets results.
And I became close to him because of that, right?
Wow.
And I remember even sending him like a baby announcement after I had my baby, because I just felt like, you know, you kind of helped make this possible because your prayers were so, you know, but
he was the angel making the announcement to Mary.
Yeah. So I graduated from PBU, super pregnant. And I waddled down the stage and I gave birth to my first child a week later after I graduated. And just under 2 weeks after that, we moved to San Antonio. We were on the road. So I had moved from there to there so that he can start his residency. And that was my new life for a period of time, for about 4 years. I ended up having my second child there. And during that course, so I was set to basically, I wanted to get a master's of social work and public health. There was a dual degree program that I was applying to. But then when we moved and I had my baby, I thought, I don't know if I can do this right now. And so the people around me are like, well, then don't, like, just be with your baby. Like, you don't have to right now. Just save it for later. It was just like, well, just save it for later. Just do this right now and just save it for later. And so it's like, okay, like when they start school, when they're like in preschool and stuff, and then I can resume my education. And so it was kind of pushed aside. So after I have my second child, because I also felt very strongly, and that only increased, was I felt that I shouldn't try to not have a baby. Like, I'm married, so birth control was no. Like, you don't do birth control. Like, that was kind of something that I had begun to believe over time, was just like, well, if God wants me to have a child, then I'll have a child. If not, then I won't.
But there was no one in the church or anything in scripture that necessarily made you think that.
I had a few professors that had kind of maybe put that out there. And,
Wow.
and I even remember at the time thinking, well, I don't know if I necessarily completely agree with that,
Mm.
but it had been put out there. And
These
so
were male professors or female professors? I just
male,
gotta ask. I have to ask. Male
male.
professors telling you something about
Yeah, they didn't
birth
tell me
control.
personally. There
Right.
wasn't like, listen, young lady. It was
Right.
put out there. It was put out there.
Something
Yes.
about birth control is you trying to thwart the will of God.
Yes.
And you just kind
Yes.
of you pick that up from just the
Yes.
culture, the
Yeah.
Christian culture at PBU. Wow.
Hmm. Yeah, I did.
This is this is to me, that's another version of spiritual sexual assault. Like I don't know, but I don't know if there's something abusive about that.
It's a lack of autonomy for sure, because I'm not making these decisions for myself,
Right.
really.
Lack of
I'm
autonomy for you, but
relying
it's
for
autonomy for
me.
them.
Hmm.
It's male autonomy. It's the male saying to women, here's how your body ought to be used, and here's what you ought
Yeah.
not do. So
But through the
someone's got an
lens of
autonomy.
like, well, this is what God would
Right.
want, right? Like this is what God
Yeah.
like, because he's the one that opens and closes wombs, right? It says that. It says it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if he wants to close mine, he can close
Mm,
it. If he wants to open it, who am I? Like if
mm,
he's entrusting these children to me, who am I to say no, no thanks, God.
mm,
No thank you for the gift, right? Because
mm. Yeah.
like,
Children are a gift.
yeah, they're a gift
Yeah.
of the Lord. Why would
Mm,
who am I to reject this
mm.
gift from God? So I didn't.
Wow.
And over time, it was also introduced the idea of homeschooling, which
Hmm.
I opposed
Hmm.
immediately because I thought, well, but that's supposed to be the time that I go to school
Mm,
again. And like I wanted to work, and
mm,
I just had this idea that I would have a career and that was what I wanted. But then it's like, but why do you want that?
mm,
If you don't,
mm,
then it became, well, you don't have to work. If you don't
mm.
have to work, why would you choose? Your children like are the most important thing. Like they are your ministry.
And how many
And
children did you have at that time?
at that time I had two.
Okay.
I had two children. And I'm like, I just felt like, I don't know because I knew if I did that, then I can't go to school. I can't work. I can't do these
Mm,
other things. Um, but there were other people that homeschooled, and it was kind of a lot of this idea of,
mm,
well, but the best way to ensure that your children,
mm.
because right now, like they're the most important thing. And
Right.
what's the most important thing to do for them is to ensure that they have a biblical worldview, right? That
Mm,
they know Jesus, that they know
mhm,
God. And so it became, what is the best way to do that? To teach them yourself, to make sure that you find a Bible-based curriculum for them. And so
mm,
that's what I ended up doing. I homeschooled for 5 years.
mhm,
And it was all Bible based, right? Like
mhm,
it was that, because I believe like the most important thing for them to do is memorize
mm,
scripture,
mm.
and kind of everything else would fall into place. So the
Wow.
very first thing that I would teach them was how to read, right? So they were all very young readers,
Mm,
and we were memorizing scripture. We did Awana,
mm.
they were a part of it's. I don't
You
know if
said
I
they
can
were
say.
all, but you only mentioned two.
So, so when I left Texas, so we moved from Texas to Florida while
Mm,
I was pregnant with my third.
okay.
Um, I have five. I have five boys right now.
Uh,
Um,
wow.
right now.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
It is finished. Okay. I can say that very,
Okay.
very
Okay.
confidently. But so came to Florida, and Florida, when I moved here, I feel like this is when I hit my stride spiritually.
Mm,
Okay. Because I had already started kind of the homeschooling, right? Um, we came here, we immediately find a church. Like
mm.
before we even found our home, we found the church. The church
Wow.
ended up being like a few blocks away from the house that we ended up
Mhm,
getting.
mm,
Immediately, we're starting. Before we were small group leaders, and I was a youth group leader, and I was a women's Bible study leader. And so I kind of took all that and
mhm,
just brought that here. So we did children's church. I was in Awana. Pretty much any opportunity I had to serve, I was there. I was in the church most of the week, I would say there. I did homeschooling. We had people in our home. We were small group leaders, so we did that.
Wow.
And
With
it
3
was
young
just
children, you're doing all that.
at that time. Yes. And I continued to. Like, I remember even when I had my 4th, I was super pregnant while I was leading a women's Bible study. I was co-leading with someone. And I took maybe like a week or 2 off, like, after that, and just kind of brought him, like, he was in here one week, and then he was like doing the little sling after, and people were like, well, maybe you take a break. And I'm like, no, I can't take a break. Like, because I knew my fear was, if I take a break from serving, then I'm not going to get back into it. And what am I if I'm not serving God? Like, I need to be serving him. Because number one, you can't ever do enough. So it's not like I can't just take a break. I should be able to do all of these things because this is why I'm here. This is my purpose in life, is to serve him. So that's what I did.
When you say you can't ever do enough, of course, the Christian, response would be, no, you can't do enough, which is why Christ already did it all. So you don't have to, you don't have to serve him. You could never pay him back anyway. He's already paid it all. So maybe
we owe him
sense
our lives. We owe him. If we're not serving, where's our fruit? How can we be? Because how can you be a believer and claim, that he did all this for us, but then you're living your life in a way that isn't serving him?
So
because
it was
if you really
afraid
believe,
of ungratefulness.
What was that?
Was it a fear of ungratefulness? Like, because someone could say, you're not called to servitude, you're called to gratitude. You serve out of gratitude, not.
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying.
I didn't serve from fear, though. That's the thing.
Okay.
I did it because I genuinely enjoyed it, and I genuinely loved God because of what he had done for me.
Gotcha.
Okay. Like, it wasn't even, I guess now I have to. It's like, no, like, this is, there was such a strong purpose, right? Like, this is what I had been called to do.
Gotcha.
Like, he chose me, Brady. He chose me. So I'm going to do everything that I can for him because I am grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for that. So why would I be doing anything else with my life? It's not even mine. He bought it, right? Like, so it's not my life.
That's what you do with slaves, right? You buy their life, and you own their service. You own their labor. But no, I just wanted to take that stone away from anybody who was waiting to say, aha, that's what's wrong with your story. But okay. So 4th child, serving. Was your husband on board with you being such a dutiful homeschooler, servant of the Lord, all that kind of? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And we didn't have the kids involved in anything that wasn't, they were in Trail Life, which is like, I don't know if most people know that it's like Boy Scouts, but it's Christian. It's a Christian organization.
I have no idea.
Yeah, man. So, and I remember at one point even going through all of their, the DVDs that I had. I threw out so many things that I'm like, this just isn't edifying. Like, so for a period of time, we never listened to or watched anything that wasn't Christian. Okay. It was only worship music. It was only, I had scripture ever. I was anointing. I mean, oiled up every house, car, person, pet. Okay. Because I genuinely believed, like, in the power of anointing and the power of prayer and the power of scripture, even just having it displayed, right? There's power in the word of God. So have it out there. I would have a different scripture. There were different scriptures, I would say, that they needed to memorize every week, not just for Awana, but like separate ones. And as well, also was a part of their curriculum. So there was a verse that was in their curriculum, a verse that was on Awana, and then also an additional verse
Hmm.
that I would have up on a board, like a whiteboard, in the house. And I took it very seriously. I really believed, and I got really into prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I
Hmm.
prayed a lot, and I mean, so many times, and I would, lead certain prayer groups. I mean, I laid hands on people and prayed for them
Hmm.
because I believed like that prayer works. Like you were
Hmm.
never going to convince me that prayer wasn't powerful and that
Hmm.
it wasn't the most important thing, right? Along with scripture and memorizing
Hmm.
scripture and having the word of God in you.
Hmm.
Um,
Did you pray in tongues?
I did not pray in tongues, no,
Okay.
because that wasn't allowed. And that's something I learned at PBU. That's just a
Okay.
big no-no. I remember I failed. There was a paper about, anyway, yeah. I was like, no, that's not a thing. So I learned
What
that very early on.
you supported
Well,
tongues
no,
and you failed because of it?
it was just more of like I had kind of had a more open, like, well, like, how do we
Hmm.
really know for sure? Like, who are we to say
Hmm.
that someone's can experience it or someone can't?
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I thought at the time. I'm like, well,
Hmm.
who are we to say like
Hmm.
that? No, you can't ever. And then the professor was like, no, this is what it is. So it was very like
Ah.
shut down.
So they were a cessationist kind of school, and you were open
Yes.
to maybe, and they were like, no, we're
Just
not
kind of
having
like,
that.
well, how do we really know? It's like, hold on, no, you don't think like that. Like, no.
Well, here's the funny,
We
the
don't do
funnier
that
thing.
here.
Here's the funnier thing to me. Right now, there are two different kinds of Christians watching this. Some supporting that, and others saying, see,
Mhm.
that's what's wrong with your salvation. You didn't speak in tongues, you didn't pray in tongues. So just the idea that you can have two Christians on the opposite ends
Mhm.
of the fence with the same Holy Spirit speaking to both of them about what a spiritual experience is. If that doesn't
Mhm.
show you something's wrong, there's a
Yeah.
dead monkey on the line somewhere with what you're believing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, one of them is wrong, right?
how about that?
And they're both kind of pointing to each other.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
praying,
So,
you're a prayer warrior. You're laying hands on people. You're doing what the scriptures say
absolutely.
to do.
Absolutely. And it
Mm,
got to the point where we were going to move. We knew we were going to move. And so it was like, well, we need to pray. And I'm
mm,
looking for every sign, right? Prayer
mm,
and just kind of seeing, and I'm seeing signs like, oh, well, I prayed. And then all of a sudden there's this, and there's this
mm,
state that pops up. And,
mm,
and then it didn't like things just like I was so clear at like in receiving these messages. I'm like, I just got the clearest message. This is
mm,
exactly what we're supposed to be doing. I'm so excited. And it was like I would have gone anywhere. Like
mm,
I would have gone anywhere. It's like, well, if this is where God wants us to be, then what could go
mm,
wrong? Um, and so we thought we were going in one place. I remember at the time, and I guess I'll just say it because we did end up moving there,
mm,
was to Tennessee, and everything was lining up. I'm like, this is where God has for us. It's so
mm,
clear. And then that ended up not happening, and it was just like, whoa, like okay,
mm.
right, readjust. That's we'll figure it out. It's
That
got to
didn't
be
shake your faith.
no.
Okay.
It was just like, okay, well, maybe it's just a not now.
Mm,
Because it's like, okay, he can be showing you something, but it's not for right now. It's just for later, just kind of
mm.
like a later
He's
thing.
never wrong.
Well, no, of course not. Come on, Brady. It's never wrong.
Jesus said he'd be back in the lifetime of his disciples, but he just meant later disciples.
Yes, you don't know, and no one knows the time. So
Hmm.
I don't know why. Yeah, don't get hung up on that because you're getting hung up on the wrong things.
Hmm.
So we moved, and I find out not even a week later that I'm pregnant with baby number 5.
Hmm.
And so we're in a new place again. It was kind of just a crazy time, and we went to many different churches. So this was also different, and that we didn't immediately start going to a different church when we moved.
Hmm.
We visited, I can't even tell you how many. Like
Hmm.
I want to say at least 10
Hmm.
over the course, and there was always something because I'm like, well, no, they didn't like this message was this way, or because I was very particular. It's like it
Hmm.
has to be a very strong, biblically based,
Hmm.
right, environment. I remember walking into one and they had a picture of like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, and I knew I'm like, this is not the place, because this is just not the type of church that we need to be going to. So I was very discouraged, and like we didn't find the church, and I started almost feeling like we need to find something. We need to find something, and we eventually did find a church that we started. You know, we became involved in a small group there, and I remember wanting to serve like immediately, because I'm like, I need to serve. Like, what am I if I'm not in here? And we had the pastor come over, and I kind of had this whole presentation. I wrote everything, like I had like just kind of this whole thing of, this is what I think like would be great and beneficial as far as like a women's ministry and kind of things, because they were lacking a lot of them. Like, I want to do this. This would be great. And
with
it wasn't
5
received
children.
well. The fifth one was still in there. He was still baking, But
you're just volunteering, like
because I never let that, like, I was, popping babies out and just kind of serving all the, like, I didn't take breaks. Okay. I didn't take breaks. So this was the first time that I wasn't fully submersed in serving, even since becoming a believer, because very shortly after that, I was serving and I continued to serve. And so not being involved in serving was just really like different for me. And there were a lot of things that we were starting to struggle with, and we realized we don't really want to be here. We tried going back to Philadelphia, and everything got lined up for that. And we're praying, and God is just opening every door. Boom, 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 boom. Perfect. Lining it all up. And we get to that part, and we get to that point, and then all of a sudden the door is just slammed shut in like the worst way. And it was so painful. It was painful. And all the while, I'm kind of having things where I'm like, I'm going to pray. And there was a woman that told me before I even moved away from Florida, she's like, wrestle. The best thing you can do is wrestle with the Lord. Don't give up on wrestling. And I took that, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to wrestle with the Lord. I'm going to wrestle with him. Okay. And so I did. And I prayed so much. Like, I was really, really deeper into it. And I was like, well, I'm going to pray in a way that I'm just going to kind of try and block everything else out. Like, maybe I'm trying to grasp things too hard. I didn't I'm starting to realize maybe I'm kind of putting things together that he's not presenting to me. Maybe I'm doing this myself. So I need to clear my mind so that I know that I am only hearing his voice.
Wow.
So I practice just kind of blocking out everything that I felt like maybe that's me. Maybe that's just me. And I'm blocking everything else out.
Wow.
Blocking everything else out so that I could receive his messages as purely as I can receive them. And over time,
stick a pin right there. For those who have been watching this channel, Jay Witt said one time, once he switched from a charismatic perspective to a more, what he felt was a more scriptural or Bible based, like, does the Bible really teach that? He said that was the awakening of his skeptical powers. And he had only done that so that he could become a better Christian. But just by awakening those skeptical powers, he now was able to look at things that, even the things that as a Christian, his skepticism started saying, well, dag, I don't even know if I can believe that just as a Christian. And before you know it, if you keep pulling that thread, those same skeptical powers lead you to a place that you would have never imagined. Yes. And so it's interesting to hear you say, you just want to be sure that you're hearing God's voice clearly, so you become more skeptical of what's going on in your own mind. And that ends up being a path.
Yeah, because it wasn't his fault that the messages were maybe not clear for me, or that I was misinterpreting. That couldn't have been his fault. Like, he's obviously going to be doing his part. It's me. So let me block out. Let me just be. And so I did that. And what eventually happened, and I guess I'll just skip to it, I started to realize it was just really quiet. First of all, it was really quiet, Brady. It got real quiet real quick. And I'm like, what? This could also be, because sometimes he uses just silent time, right?
Yeah.
Like that silent time. This could just be he's doing the little silent thing right now. And over time that turned into, why am I not hearing anything? Like, why am I not hearing anything? And that did turn into, is he even there? And as soon as I even thought that, it was like, oh, don't think that. Like, it was like a, and immediately I was just like looking for kind of like, you get like scared because even just having the thought, even just having the thought, because he knows all of our thoughts. And I'm like, he knows what I'm thinking right now. He knows that I just thought that he might not even like be real. Not even, I don't think he's listening, because that turned into, well, is he? And so I started praying in a way that was like, God, like, just, I know, like, how I shouldn't even ask this of you. I know I shouldn't even ask you to prove, right? For any sort of proof. But you know my heart. And that was the thing that I might even get emotional now. Because I begged him. I was like, you know my heart. You know that I want this so badly. You know that I want you to be real. I want this to be real. Please, God, please just, I need the reassurance. Like, you know that I need it right now. And I didn't get it. And it was so painful. It was so painful. And around that time, there was so much fear. Fear was a huge thing, because it was just like, I can't even believe that this is, because I can honestly say up until then, I didn't have any point in time, Brady, that I thought, maybe this isn't real. Maybe that never happened. I was just, as soon as I was so focused, and it was just boom, boom, boom. And I was just going forward.
Yeah.
I wasn't really looking back. I wasn't even looking, over here. It was just like, no, this is real. Even in times that I was like, maybe like not living right, kind of, it wasn't because I thought it wasn't real. It was just like, I'm just like such a sinner. Like, I just need to get it together. I need to like, and so.
So I'm sorry, let me ask, because I'm hearing bits of my story. I've said this several times when I just had a thought that, oh, this probably isn't real. And in a flash, I'm like, told myself, shut up, don't think that again, and tried to bury it. But for the years after that experience, when I thought that, you say you were praying, telling God I need something, and nothing happened. I was saying that to God, and things were happening. Like you, when you see, I prayed this prayer and then walked out and got this phone call, those kind of coincidences. I spent the next 3 years after I felt that foundation crack, looking for those kinds of things, just so I could say, oh, that was God, or that was probably God, making coincidences into God's handiwork. You had some of those experiences prior to that foundation crack. Then you said it got real quiet. Were those kind of coincidences not still happening? Like, nothing happened that made you say that could have been God?
So that's the thing. So there were a few things, but then I realized, and here's the thing, I realized I'm doing this. I'm putting this together myself. And then it's just, from that point, Brady, it's just like everything starts to just kind of, because I started to realize, okay, well, but if I accept that I'm putting these things together, what else have I put together? How much of this has been me? And I don't know if you heard the have you watched the show Swarm? Did you see that? Okay, so there's a part where she's basically speaking to this cult leader who's Billie Eilish in the show, right? She's the cult leader, and she asked the main character, she's like, do you pray? And she responds, I used to. And she says, well, why'd you stop? And she's like, because I realized it was just an echo. And she asked, well, what was? God, basically. She was saying, like, when she prayed, like God was actually just an echo, like of herself. And I remember I had to like stop it because I was just like, hold on, what did she just say? Because it was just, and I'm sure it's been said maybe in different ways before other people, but I was like, yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. I started to realize, I think I've been doing, and this was a big deal because, really, like I said before, every major decision that I had made over the past 18 years was because I believe that this is what God wanted me to do. If God isn't real, what have I been doing? Like, what is this? And it was terrifying. And it was, you think about a lot of even just the stages of grief. And I'm sure you had similar, like you talk about denial, right? Anger, being angry, like, well, I can't believe I spent X amount of years of my life believing something that wasn't even real. And, just kind of all this stuff. And it was one of the hardest things that I went through. It was, I think people have this idea of like, people leave the church, right? I'm not a believer anymore. Now it's just like, oh, I'm just brunching it up. Like, I'm just partying, doing whatever. I'm free. No, like when I got to that point, it was my entire life was built on that, right? What I was doing with my life. The fact that I had the amount of kids that I had, their names that I had painstakingly picked out for them, every detail about our lives, okay, what we watched, what we listened to. Like I have just such a chunk of pop culture missing. I'm just like, it's just like, I don't understand so many references because I only would expose myself to very specific things and my children because I didn't want to feed into it. Was like, I just wanted for things to come in and not have the worldly influence. And so it was depressing. It was so depressing. I was so sad and heartbroken. I felt sick. I was talking, to people about it too. And it was just, it was very difficult. It was very difficult to talk to people because I couldn't even fully express myself because it was automatically, you get, you have certain phrases and you just get the similar response, right? It's all automated. It's just like, oh, press 1 for, for this, press 2, and you just get the same response.
Right.
And I couldn't even fault them for it because not only I knew there wasn't even going to be a question that I could ask or a statement to put out there that I didn't already know what the response was going to be because I had, number one, already heard it before. I've heard it all before. And I've also
you would have probably said it.
I've said it. Yes, I have said this to people. I already know what the answer is. I already know what the answer is. But you know what? It doesn't hold anymore. It just doesn't hold anymore. And that was such a scary, scary time.
So had you read anything or like what? Like, is it just wait, no one's answer? It's once I start quizzing or once I start filtering out the voices in my head, it becomes very quiet. That was all it took for this thing to begin unraveling for you.
That's all it took. That's all it took. I wasn't like, well, let me just read about like atheism or kind of other. No, it wasn't that at all. And I thought about that because I had a feeling that you would kind of ask something similar. It's like, well, what did it take? It didn't take much, which is kind of surprising. And I thought, well, that's kind of, but then I also thought back to my conversion, Brady. It didn't take much. It didn't take much for me to become a believer, right? It didn't take much. No one questioned it at the time, though, because now I have believers who are questioning, like, well, it didn't take much. So how do you know? But no one at the time was like, well, it didn't take much for you to completely cross over and just start, this is what I am now. I'm a daughter of God. Like that wasn't a thing, but it didn't take much at the time. It just didn't.
And that was okay. It was okay for it to not take much then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
I think my personality has a lot to do with that too, because I'm one of those people. I've done like certain like diets and stuff, very strict things. And I'm just someone who's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I don't have any issues with it. I will be the person that I just, if I like decide I'm going to do something, then I'm just going to do it. I don't look this way. I don't look that way. I'm just like, this is what I'm doing. And I focus and I go and that's how I accomplish and reach my goals for better or worse. I'm not even saying
Mm.
that's a good way to live,
Right.
but that's just what I'm
Mhm.
prone to being like. And so
Right.
I had to make that choice. And I remember thinking, well, how loose do I want to interpret it then? Like, do
Mm.
I want to say, well, okay, all right, so maybe this isn't real, maybe that's not real. Maybe I can still, I was trying to figure out what can I hold on to? What can I grasp onto so that
Mm.
I don't lose this? I
Mm.
can't, because this has been my identity, my
Mhm.
purpose for my entire adult life.
Mm.
Like, how do I still hold on to something?
Mhm.
And over time, it's like, well, I can't. There is
Mm.
nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to hold on to. Sure, I could be someone who's like, well, okay, like I could identify as a Christian. I don't really have to necessarily, I can just maybe think that it's stories or it's
Mm.
like, you know, you can learn lessons and stuff, or there's so many different interpretations. And I've even spoken to
Mm.
people who I went to PBU with and kind of other people that I went to church, and some of them have very loose interpretations, and the way
Mm.
that they live their lives, you know, is kind of a more like,
Mm.
you know, you kind of do what you know, you do what you want, and you take what you kind of take. It's like a la carte. You kind of take a little bit
Mhm.
of this,
Mm.
leave that there, like, oh no, thank you, I'm not gonna do that one, but I'll take this and I'll hold on to
Mm.
that. And that's very common. It's common, but I
Mm.
couldn't do it because
Mm.
I think I do tend to be kind of more all or nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm not going to do this and like
Mm.
100%, if I'm not going to go all in,
Mhm.
then I can't do it. I can't pretend. I'm not
Mm.
going to pretend because it was like,
Mm.
this was my life.
Right.
And it doesn't take much to kind of take certain pieces, like you said, the thread, and all of a sudden,
Mhm.
like, there is no sweater. It's just a pile
Mm.
of, you know, like
Yarn. Yeah.
knotted up stuff that you can't do anything with.
Mm.
And that was really difficult. That was really
Mm.
difficult. It was difficult because I'm like, okay, so I have these children, right? So that
Mm.
was the other thing. I have these children that I have raised
Mm.
to believe these things,
Mm.
and I now have to tell them, because it wasn't like, well, let me just keep it to myself. No,
Mhm.
I was going to tell them, mommy was wrong.
Mm.
This isn't
Now,
real. This isn't
even before
true.
you get to mommy was wrong, what is
Yes.
mommy
Yeah.
and daddy like?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, are you sharing the struggle with him, and how's that?
Yeah. So I remember because we were in the car driving,
Mm.
and I didn't know how I was going to present it to him. I
Mm.
didn't know how he would receive it. I was very nervous. And
Mhm.
so I started talking to him, and I'm kind of, you know, circling around. It's like circling and circling. And I finally get to it. And I just like, basically, I just don't, I, I said something like, I just don't think I believe in God anymore.
Mm.
And saying it was just, you know, when you first start saying it out loud, you know,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's just so scary to even say, and
Mm.
it feels so big, right? Um,
Mm.
and because I think there's still a part of me, even then, was just like, but if there is, he's probably really angry right now. He's probably so angry, and
Mm.
there could be ramifications. And I remember
Mm.
being afraid of, what does this mean, not only for me, because what about my kids? Are my kids at
Mm.
risk now of
Mm.
some sort of retaliation, of like,
Mm.
or not even, so it wouldn't be retaliation, right? It would just be kind of a course correction of,
Mhm.
how is he going to bring me back into the faith? Is he going to cause something to happen to one of
Mm.
my children that's going to pull
Wow.
me closer to him, right? Because
Wow.
that's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because so I was scared. Like, I
Mm.
remember being
Mm. Mm.
afraid, because I just thought, because there's still at that point that part in the back of my head where I thought, what if he is though? Like, what if he is? I don't believe that at all today, but at the time, kind of still going through it. So I presented it to him, and he's like, you know, I kind of was feeling the same way. It's like, what? So
Mm.
and I'm like, okay. So it was honestly very
Wow.
short. He was like, I don't know if I can say that there's no like God or creator in general, but I
Mm.
definitely don't think that it's. So he was kind of on
Mm.
the same path. We just had never spoken about it. And
Wow.
I don't know how soon. It's kind of a weird, like,
Mm.
it was kind of an interesting. So he was on board with us, and I remember it was close
Mm.
to even like certain holidays that were coming up, like Easter and stuff. And I just remember thinking, well, how do we do this?
Mm.
Because it was I was like one of those people, like, there is no Santa Claus. Like Santa Claus stuff, we're not going to be like in this house because this is all about Jesus and like Easter Bunny. Like this is resurrection. Like, I was that person. Okay. Like, so, and then it was just like, oh, well, how do we do this now? Like, do we do it that way? I guess, like, are we bringing bunnies in or, it was just such a different, because I emphasize with my kids, you know why we're doing this, right? Like, you know why, like, what is this about? And because it wasn't just like, oh, because Easter and chocolate bunnies, like, no. Like, and it was so he was on board with everything. And
Wow.
I had to talk to my children about it, and that was difficult. I'm like, I don't even know how to say this. Like, how do you say, like, mommy and daddy were wrong your whole life? Because my oldest had accepted Christ. He was a believer at that point. And so when I presented it to him when we talked, I was so surprised because, and he was really good at memorizing scripture. Like, he was just so proud of himself with everything. He wanted to be baptized. He hadn't been baptized yet because I just felt like he was still a little too young. Like, let's make sure we do it at the right time.
Right.
We don't want to be like the people that are like way too, like, like,
yeah.
And he's like, that's okay, mommy, because honestly, like, I didn't really believe that stuff. And yeah. And
How old was he?
He would have been maybe 10-ish. I'm going to say 9 or 10 at the time.
Wow.
That he said, I didn't actually believe it. He's like, and then he kind of went further. He's like, there's just things that like just didn't make sense to me. That just didn't make sense to me. Yeah. But he wasn't going to say anything. And you know what? In that moment, I thought about people that I knew that I had, that went to church with, who were the same age as me. And over time, and their parents were believers, but then they walked away from the faith. And I just remember thinking, like, he would have been that person.
Right.
He would have been that person who, once he was on his own, would have been like, okay, like, I'm out. I don't believe this at all. And I realized in that moment, I just realized, like, that's him. And I would have been so shocked and like, but you did all the things, all the scripture, like it just, and he was just like, I don't believe that. And so it's been kind of ongoing. Because it's changed a lot of how I view things and what I've told them, and just like, yeah, there's a reason for this and there's a reason for that. Because I genuinely had believed at one point there's a reason for everything. And in due time, like, God is going to show us what that reason is, or not. It's up to him. We don't have to know. Like, we don't even have to know what his reasons for doing things are. You just have to believe and trust that there is a reason because he said so. Right. So now it's just like, I don't believe there is a reason for anything. Which would be scary probably for some people, but it isn't in a lot of ways, because you realize, okay, well, I just have to kind of do things myself. And I think sometimes when we really believe that there's a reason for it, we can't help but look for that reason.
Right.
And we kind of torture ourselves. I remember torturing myself when for different things. Once I remember torturing myself when my oldest, and it was a scare, he was fine, but we had a cancer scare with him. And I remember before he went, and I just even remember seeing like the word like oncologist on the paper, and it was terrifying. And I just remember thinking, maybe this is why, because at the time, I'm just trying to think, like, maybe this is why God wanted me to homeschool. Maybe because he wanted me to have like more time with him. Like, it's hard to talk about it without feeling what I felt at the time. And it was around the same time that my middle, smack dab in the middle, he had several developmental delays. And that was really difficult at the time. Later to find out that he is on the spectrum, he has autism. And so you think a lot about, well, maybe there's a reason, there has to be a reason for it, right? There has to be a reason why my children are going through this or that. And you torture yourself over it, right? At least I did. I'm not going to speak for everyone. But I think when you try to
Wow.
find the purpose, it
Yeah.
can be really discouraging.
Yeah.
And
It's a burden. Someone else's purpose on your life is a burden.
and kind of thinking about, and it's unfortunate that a lot of, people are even told, well, even if it just saves one person, right? Even
Mm,
if God planned this horrible thing and it just saves one soul, then it's
mm,
worth it. And that was the other thing that kind of,
mm,
it wasn't just the prayer thing. I realized, well, but he's all powerful, right? It
mm.
was kind of the same. And I hadn't seen it, and I've seen it since then said so many times of like,
Right.
he can't be all powerful and all loving at the same
Right.
time. It doesn't
Right.
work. So I
Mm,
kind of thought of that stuff on my own of,
mm-hmm.
hold
Mm,
on, why would he cause a
mm,
child to go through something so horrific,
mm,
just to save one person? Like, isn't he more powerful than that?
mm.
Like, doesn't he's supposed to be like he's supposed to love, and he knows like every hair on our heads. Like, that just
Mm,
seems off.
mm,
And I don't know, like, why would it have to, and I know I shouldn't even be questioning why, right? Or why, but when
mm.
all you have to do is take one step back and look and think, this isn't lining up. Why?
Yeah.
Like, I think we should ask, why would he have this happen and
Mm,
this and still call himself all powerful and
mm,
still, say that he loves us and it not
mm.
be,
Yeah.
a toxic relationship? When you look
Mm.
at what an unhealthy relationship looks like, there's,
The power dynamic.
extreme jealousy,
Yeah.
right? That's one
Mm-hmm.
thing. You talked about gaslighting, being hypercritical,
Mm,
blame shifting, just
mm,
um, outburst, like angry outbursts, right?
mm,
And
mm.
just kind of, there's a lot there that just
Yeah.
reads very unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
emotional abuse type relationship.
Mm. Wow.
So, and certain people are more susceptible to that. Um,
Mm,
people who are highly empathetic, people who
mm-hmm.
avoid conflict, all these things that I would categorize myself as,
Mm.
like, yeah, I wouldn't
Wow.
see anything wrong with that at all.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Wow. So you and your husband both
Mhm.
basically deconvert around the same time,
Yes.
walk the kids through it. And the
Hmm.
oldest says, well, I wasn't even really wasn't even really down with that,
Yeah.
which has got to be a relief, I'm sure. Um,
Yes. But also like, it was sobering.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The burden of purpose is released, is lifted from you. Um, just the
Hmm.
idea of living with someone else's purpose over your head, especially when you could never even really be sure what that purpose is. But you're
Yeah.
trying to always figure out and put yourself in the right position to make sure
Hmm.
you're in position.
Yeah, because
Um,
you don't want to
so
miss the
that's,
opportunity or calling,
yeah,
or
yeah.
you want to make sure that you're ready to receive what God has for you
Hmm. Wow.
all the time.
So you deconvert.
Hmm.
How many years you said was about 2 years ago now, almost.
About, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, how has life changed? Do you still think uh, you don't go to church anymore?
I do not go to church
Any
anymore.
desire to find what's spirituality like for you? What's life like for you post convert deconversion?
So, I'm not sure which one to answer first. So, spiritually, um, I would probably identify as an agnostic atheist.
Mm.
Or what was the term? You had a special word that you
Oh,
used, and I said, I'm going to steal that. And then I
agnostic.
forgot it. Agnostic, yes. Um, because I don't believe in any God.
Mm,
Um, and I'm not really sure about the whole spiritual side of things. I'm
mhm,
open, but it
mm,
also, like, it doesn't affect my everyday life,
mm,
whether or not there is or
mhm,
isn't. And so right now I'm realizing like how easy it is to kind of see patterns and things even that don't exist. And that's why prayer and all that, like, that's why it's everything is so reinforced, because our minds are
Yeah.
programmed basically to seek patterns out just for basic survival, right? But we have a tendency to take that
All right.
a
It's
little
kind of
far at
overactive.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I can see that I still do that from time to time. And so, but now that I recognize and know, well, that's just how all of our brains are kind of wired. I'm able to see, like, okay, well, let me really think about this. Like,
Right.
maybe there isn't more to this than there is, because I've realized when I do that, I'm not really serving myself, because I'm putting more stock into things that really I shouldn't. And so I don't think that there's some higher power of any kind. I don't have any desire to go to a church of any kind. Yeah, I just don't believe any of that anymore. I really miss community. I miss a lot of things that I used to do. So I'm trying to change the way that I do those things, right? So
Okay.
I just started volunteering somewhere that the focus is on women and children, but they're not Bible based, and so that's different.
Wow. Cool.
And with me and my husband, so that kind of changed a lot of things about our relationship, mainly because, and this is the thing, when you are making these, like I said before, huge decisions through the lens of, this is what God has for me, this is what God wants for my life, you take that away, and it's just like, well, then what was that? And so it really forced me to reevaluate all of those decisions. And one of those decisions was, why did we get married? And should we still be married? And kind of all those things. And so right now
Wow.
we are separated, which we both realized was just the better thing to do. Like, I think we realized we make really great friends. We're really great partners. But there was just so many things that we just didn't have in common. Like, there were a lot of things that he really enjoyed doing, that I really enjoyed doing, that we just kind of pretty much gave up on because we didn't enjoy doing them together. And we just, like, we both kind of gave up parts of ourselves, and who we were, to kind of be like, well, let's just, we're those parts of the triangle, and just kind of, that's our focus. As long as with the both of us are kind of going towards God, if he's at the top of this pyramid, and we're just kind of trucking along and just kind of going in this direction, then we're good. And we did
The point of
that
that whole
really
triangle
well.
analogy is, the point of that is, the closer you guys get to God, the closer you'll be to each other.
Yes.
And you guys are just banking on that happening.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were serving, we were doing that, and we did it really well. Like, there are people that we have told of our current situation, and they are shocked, as they should be, because it's shocking, it's surprising. Because if you would have asked anyone a year beforehand, well, I certainly would have said, there's no way, because there wasn't a gradual, you hear people like, oh, and then this happened, and then a year later this happened. Then no, it wasn't like this gradual. I say, like, I was at the point in my spiritual life where I couldn't have been striving more towards this. Like, I was just so on it. And then it happened. And so it was to find ourselves. I would have never imagined at any point in my marriage beforehand that I would ever even think about not being married to this person. It just wasn't even a thought. Like, I never had this, well, I don't know, or maybe it's just, no, it's like, this is just what our life is right now. Like, this is the person that God had for me, that God still has for me. And so, and it just, that's just what you do. That's just what, and he's, a great guy. Like, why, what would be wrong with me? So So yeah, so it's been an interesting, so it looks very different probably than
Mhm.
what a lot of people would imagine
Right.
as far as the
So you guys are
separation and all.
separated now.
Yes.
Was there or is there any pressure to stay together for the sake of got 5 children?
Not from ourselves.
Okay.
I think it took, so I'll go back to that. I guess there was a little bit from each other because it took a year of us
Mm,
talking about it for us to make the decision. So we
mm,
get asked a lot. There have been a few people that are like, well, are you sure? Have you guys
mm,
really talked about it? And I'm like, we talked for a year. Like this was
mm,
an ongoing conversation because it was one of those things. As soon as I even had the thought,
mm,
I presented it to him of
mhm,
what if this isn't how things are supposed to be for us?
mhm.
Because I didn't want to even make it, and I hadn't decided anything at that time. But I didn't want to leave him out of the conversation.
Gotcha.
Like, yeah, I mean, because there are people that I know that their spouses kind of realized and found out because they were served papers. Okay. And I was like,
Mm,
I don't want that to be how this goes down. So as soon
mm,
as I had the thought, and I remember feeling really guilty and bad about it for even thinking the thought of what
mm,
if we we're not supposed to be together, or what if we don't, not supposed to, but like maybe we don't have to be
mm.
together. Maybe this isn't the best thing for you or for myself.
Well, hold on.
So we
You just tied together 2 points that were interesting. Now, this goes back to what you said a minute ago about purpose, because you
mhm,
corrected your own language
I did.
from maybe we're not
Mhm,
supposed to be together. You said, "Oh wait, that language doesn't fit the way you're looking at it." Then you
yeah.
said, "Maybe we don't have to be together." Once you take
Mhm,
that, there's some grand purpose or some grand. It's now a matter of what do you want,
yeah. Mhm,
and if you don't have to be, then why are you? Um,
mhm.
how did you get
Ye
yourself to that place of we don't have to be, but we've got 5 kids together and
Mhm,
we don't have to be married? How did you?
yeah. It took a
Mm,
lot of discussion and talking, and, um, I think part of it because I thought about my kids first, right? It's like, well,
mm,
I don't want them to be kids who don't have like their parents together and like that are because you just think like, oh well, that's there was someone, one of the other dads, and he didn't know that what we were going through or anything, but he was over at a birthday party or something we had, and he was talking about his parents, and I don't even know. We brought up like divorce, and he's like, "Oh, I would never do that to my children. I would
mm,
never do that to my children." And I just remember thinking, like, "Oh, yeah, that's like the worst thing you could do to a child, right?" Um,
mm,
so, because you think that, but
mm,
I started noticing my own children
mhm,
making comments and saying things to me and asking me questions of why, and um, and just asking like, why are these things this way or that way? And even just straight up asking, like I had my one child just like, why are you guys married?
mm.
Like, and just kind of in talking and stuff, it was
Were you
just,
guys like fighting
he
or
was just,
something?
no, that's the thing. We were not
Mm,
fighting.
okay. No
Um,
arguing,
we,
no.
no, no,
Hmm,
but I will tell you that children just pick up on
mhm,
subtle, just kind of, he was just like really pressing me on
mm,
why is this the person you chose to marry?
mhm, mm.
Because for him, it didn't make sense.
Wow.
For him, it didn't make sense because I
Mm,
think for him, he even could see you
mm,
guys aren't the same.
right.
And I think for him, he's just like, this doesn't
Mm,
kind, and he's the one who's also on the spectrum. So he just says
mhm,
what he sees, right? And
mm,
so he was just very insistent, like, and just kept, and like, no answer was really quite good enough because I didn't know how
mhm,
to answer him. It's like, well,
mm,
daddy, is a really nice guy and all this stuff. And he's just like, but why did you, and he would even ask, what, did you have other people that you knew?
mm,
Why didn't you marry those people? And just started mentioning other friends that he knows that I have now that are males. He's just like,
mhm,
well, why didn't you marry that person? And
mm,
why didn't you marry this person? Like it was just, they started asking those types of questions and even
mhm,
just asking, well, just about even me being a stay at home mom, like, what are you going to do though? Like
mhm,
it was just, they were really questioning just kind of the whole dynamic of everything and why it was the way that it was. And a lot of times when they would ask me questions and talk to me, I could tell that even like my kids wanted more for me than I even wanted for myself. And they were trying to encourage me, like, you could do this, mommy, or you could do this. And it was like they, I think on some level, just kind of could tell that there was more, that there was something. And I had always felt even guilty about thinking, should I be doing, I guess more, something else, something in addition to, right? So I think in a way I realized, well, what is this going to look like for my kids? What is it going to look like if I'm just like, well, this is just how it is. I'm just going to stick it out. And this is what's best for them. So I'm just going to focus on, it's not about me. Who cares about what I want? Because I haven't thought about that in so many years. I don't even know. And that was the other thing too.
If you would have made the decision to just stay in the marriage,
stay together and just say whatever, like it is what it is. Let's just keep going in this direction because this is what's best for them. And because he even kept asking, well, what do you want? And I'm like, I'm not even sure. I haven't spent time thinking about
who's the he that's asking you that? One
my
of your
husband
sons,
at
or?
the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And just in general, because I'm just like, I kind of want to do something else. But for a long time, it was like, well, you know, it was looked down upon for me to even have a desire to, like I said before, have a career and kind of be outside of the home, right? Because
and not be having babies.
And not be like spending as much time with my kids, because there was a sense of like, well, you're the one that like you have to be there to raise them. Like they're the most important thing. They're your ministry. Like God has given you these children. So the most important thing is just to like be there with them, for them. And everything else is just like selfish. Like, why would you want to spend time somewhere else? Like, why would you do that? And so I'm like, oh, never mind. Like, you're right. Like, that's just, I shouldn't want those things.
Scratch
and so
that from
over
the record.
time, you spend years believing this. So any desire that I had is just gone at that point. Like, you get to the point where you don't want to want anything because I didn't want to want something that wasn't what God had for me. So let me just turn that off. Let me just shut it off so that I'm only open to what he has for me, because, you know, I don't want to put myself in that position. And so when the question came, well, what do you want? Well, I don't know. Like, how do I find out what I want? Because it's not something that I'm accustomed to even thinking about or allowing myself to even have the thought. So over time, I realized that my kids, I'll put it this way. I didn't want them to see their mom give up. I didn't want them to see their mom just kind of saying, well, this is just my lot in life. I wanted them to see their mom as someone who says, you know what, this is the direction that I was in, but I'm going to pivot. And you know what, sometimes you're going to make choices in your life, and maybe you want to make a different choice later on, and that's okay. And it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. You don't have to stick with something just because, well, this is what I picked. This is what I chose. And kind of this, you know, we like to, there's this, I don't know what the word is, but when something is, you've been doing it for a certain period of time and it's like, oh, well, good on you for doing this for X amount of time. Like there's these celebrations where it's like, oh, you've been teaching for that. Good for you. Like, why are we celebrating like the length of time for something? It's like, well, but is this really what you want to be doing right now? Is this what you, and so I kind of, I want them to see that it is okay to have chapters in your life and to say, okay, that was a great chapter. And now I'm on to the next one. You don't have to stay in something just because you've been in it for this long, whether it's a job, a relationship, it doesn't matter. Like if this isn't serving what you want, then you do something else, you know, you do, and not to say like, just do whatever you want and treat people poorly or anything like that. But it is okay to change your mind. We should be changing our minds about things over time. You shouldn't have the same mindset and the same thought your entire life about something, in my opinion. Because we should be evolving. Yeah.
There's no inherent virtue in longevity. It's not inherent, especially like you said, if you have other factors that suggest not only can I move on? But I want to move on. I want to do different things. And so to think, what kind of message would it send to your children if you had stayed when the Christian community is telling you, you're doing something bad to your children if you divorce? You're looking, saying, no, I'm probably doing something bad to my children if I stay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I understand that some people are probably going to think, well, I guess you could rationalize anything. But I really do believe that.
Mhm.
I do. And I think that my example to them is very important.
Well, let's talk about that example, because you got 5
Mhm.
children. Now that
Mhm.
you're separated, I would imagine you never see your children now. So the house looks very clean behind you with 5 kids.
We see him all the time, every day, both of us,
Okay.
unless he's away. But we have a very different, I guess, I don't know how into it I want to get into, but yeah, we kind of have it set up where we're both still extremely involved every single day with
Hmm.
them. But they know that mommy and daddy are not a couple. We're not
Mhm.
together in that way, but we're still, and I've talked to a few of them. My older son, he's just, I'll ask him, because I want to keep the conversation ongoing. Well, how do you feel now?
Mhm.
How do you feel about it now? He's just like, well, I mean, it's kind of the same, because the way things are right now, it is the same.
Mm.
Whereas we're both still very involved, and we have to be,
Mm.
because there are 5 of them.
Mhm.
And there's, and a few of them have where they need therapy like a couple days a week. There's
Mm.
sports, there's music, there
Mm.
are so many things that they're involved in,
Mm.
where like we're not going to be like, okay, like I'm on today and then you're out. Like it doesn't work that way.
Mm.
And thankfully our relationship is like where we really respect and care about each other. And
Mm.
it wasn't ever this thing of, well, this person did this and this person did that. That's not
Mm.
what caused the separation. It was
Mm.
just kind of, you know what, let's take that chapter of our lives for what it was, a very great one.
Mm.
Um, and let's
Wow.
kind of try something else. Let's do
Mm.
something else. And it's okay. It's okay for us to move on to a different chapter for
Mm.
ourselves. And
Wow.
so that's kind of how it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I celebrate that. I applaud you for thinking that way. You and your husband for being mature enough to have that conversation and perspective. Um, I'm sure every person who's deconverted from something that took decades of their life can relate to what you're saying. But I definitely can relate to that. Looking at a chapter of my life and being proud of a lot that happened in that chapter,
Mm-hmm.
wanting some of those years back, wanting some of those decisions back, but
Mm-hmm.
being able to close that chapter and move on to a completely new chapter. There are few
Mm-hmm.
things in my life right now that have carried over from that chapter, that story is still being written right now. There are a lot of other things that you would have never seen coming if you look at the previous chapter and look at what's going on now. But I just think it's actually refreshing to know that life can work that way, as
Yeah.
opposed to being about this grand purpose. I'm more interested in life's potential. I have the potential to do X, Y, and Z, and I want to do
Mm-hmm.
Y, and I'm going to do Y. New chapter. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it does leave a lot more opportunity out there. And like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
what do I really want to do?
Mm-hmm.
What is this next chapter going to look like? Because I get to decide that, which
Yeah.
is scary at the same time, because
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's nice to have someone else deciding it for you,
Right.
right? Because it takes the pressure off and you're like, well, and
Yeah.
if it doesn't kind of work, I was like, well, like that's okay. Like I didn't
Right.
pick it.
God's sovereign.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just different. And it's so interesting because a lot of things happened after I deconverted that I didn't expect to happen.
Mm.
One of those things was just how less fearful,
Mm.
anxious, and depressed I
Wow.
was. I didn't
Mm.
even realize, because you don't realize until afterwards. You don't
Mm.
really see it until
Mm.
you're on the other side of it. After you go
Wow.
through kind of
Yeah.
the rabbit hole or whatever, you take the red
Mm-hmm.
pill and you're like, your eyes are open and
Mm.
I can look back and realize, wow, I
Mm.
was so anxious. I
Mm.
struggled with depression like so intensely at different times, and it just was like, I'm not praying enough. I'm not really, it was like, are you
Mm,
really giving this over to God?
mm,
Are you really doing this? And I had someone ask, even at the time, right before, like when I was kind of doing the deconversion, like, well, are you really praying enough? Like
mm.
you're just not praying enough. And I remember thinking like, no, I am. Like, I'm pretty sure I am. Like, I'm pretty sure
Mm,
I'm praying enough. Like, that is
mm.
not the issue.
Right.
Um, and even just in working with women over
Mm,
the years, because I can't really speak to the men because I just
mm,
don't know. Just that was usually like the number one struggle with women
mm,
in the church was, I'm just so fearful. I'm just so
mm.
anxious. Just the fear and anxiety that
Wow.
comes from that. Um, and
Fearful and
it's
anxious of what?
about, it's just kind of like, what do you do? And kind of, well, what am I supposed to do? Am I doing
Mm,
enough? Like, and you see, and I'm sure it's like this in many churches, like who's doing a lot of the serving?
mm.
Who's
The
behind the
women.
scenes doing a lot? It's
Mm,
the woman. Okay.
mm,
So we are behind the scenes. We are serving. We're not really, most
mm,
places we're not allowed to not be behind the scenes. It's like,
mm,
stay back there. But we're serving and it's constant. And
mm.
it's like almost the more you do it, the more you feel like you're not doing enough. And it's
Somebody's
just like
automatically going to talk about Mary versus Martha. Jesus told Martha, only one thing is necessary. Mary's chosen the better. You're running around doing all this stuff. She's
yeah.
sitting at the feet of Jesus. Maybe you just needed to sit at the feet of Jesus more. You would have been less
What does
anxious.
that look like exactly? What does sitting at the feet of Jesus look like then?
Reading his word and
Okay. But
contemplating
you're
on his
also
word.
doing all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all being done like
Right.
simultaneously, right? And what does the word say? The word is like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
we should be serving and living our
Hmm.
lives for and feeding into, the younger generation
Hmm.
and other women.
Hmm. And
And
praying
so
enough and
yeah, and
hearing from him
praying and
enough.
like this is what
Hmm.
our life should look like and to be around other believers.
Hmm.
And so I think genuinely wanting to do the right thing, because
Hmm.
that's always the genuinely wanting to do the right thing,
Hmm.
but not always knowing what that right thing is.
Hmm.
That produces so much anxiety
Yeah. Yeah.
because like, but I don't want to miss something. I don't want to mess something up. Like I want to make sure
Hmm.
I'm receiving the messages. I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting. I have to make sure that
Hmm.
I'm zeroed in. I cannot miss this.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, you become anxious over time.
Wow.
So letting go of that, I'm so much less fearful, anxious, and all that. I was on like pills for years, and I'm not saying that if you don't
Hmm.
need them, you shouldn't have them, but I just haven't had a need
Hmm.
for any type of antidepressant, anti-anxiety medicine since leaving the church a couple years ago. And this is
Wow.
the first time in years
Hmm.
that I have, because I started actually after
Hmm.
shortly after, maybe a year after of starting that because of just how
Wow.
anxious I was.
Jeez.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so I don't have that anymore. And even just, I feel more connected to the world, to just
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
nature. I don't, it's like your senses
Wow.
are almost kind of,
Yeah.
you realize that they were almost numbed down in a way. It's a
Hmm.
weird kind of thing that happens. And now it's like I can hear the birds like in a way that I haven't heard them before,
Right.
which is just, I don't know how to explain it. It probably sounds so weird.
No, I
Um,
got you.
but it also, it's just
Hmm.
this capacity to love in a way
Hmm.
that was probably the most surprising thing, Brady, was just feeling like I
Hmm.
had this capacity to love other people in a
Hmm.
way that I really didn't have as a believer. But if you would have asked me then, it's like, I can't love without the Holy Spirit in me. God is
Right.
love.
Right.
Like
I love you with the love of Christ.
anyone who doesn't have God's Spirit residing in them is
Hmm.
incapable of love because that's where
Hmm.
it comes from,
Right.
right? So
Hmm.
oddly enough, on the other side, it's like, wow, I guess
Hmm.
that's not true. And now I can love people more fully, like, and just have this acceptance of them in a way
Can you
that,
give an
whereas
example?
before, um, I don't know how to give an example. I guess just Okay, so when you're kind of interacting with people, even just meeting someone or having people in your family, and they're not believers, right? I'm talking about people who aren't believers.
Yeah.
There's always this level of, you have to kind of have almost a buffer, right? And you're also, this person is always going to be someone that you have to witness to. Not, outwardly, like you're supposed to love them. That's the most important thing, because that comes first, but you also have to witness to them. And there's this weird dance of the whole acceptance versus love, but like, don't accept the sin, like love the sinner, hate the sin. There's this kind of weird
You've got
tension.
a grid up of how much of them you can actually accept.
Yeah, it's kind of, so you're trying to always find this balance. But when you take that away, it's just like, oh, there's no tension. There's no figuring out. You're not on this kind of like teeter-totter, whatever thing. It's just, that's gone. And it's just really just so much of like a pure love and acceptance.
I get it.
Without it. And that surprised me the most, because I'm like, because I didn't think it was possible. I really didn't think that love was possible outside of God, because He is love. Like, this just that would never happen. So that was surprising. And then just the peace, peace, like having a real peace. Like, I feel so at peace. And I think that there are some people who think, well, are you so unsure about this or that? Like, no, I actually am I'm unsure about certain things, but not in the way that make me fearful. I can own up to the fact that I don't have all the answers, but I also don't need to know all the answers. And that's a relief, because we're so prone to wanting all the answers. We're so prone to be like, I need to know. And that's what draws a lot of people into religion to begin with, was that just our tendency to want to have the answers. And if we're presented with the answers, especially if there's so many other things that benefit us, we are presented with not only all the answers, Brady, we're presented with eternal security. We're presented with a purpose in this life, and to be able to look forward to the next,
the life to come. Yeah.
I mean, and the community, that's such an important piece too, because that's what people want. We want community, right? So it's a built-in community of people that can support you, and just to live life with. That's what you're supposed to live life together. And it's of course we want that. Of course we want that.
Yeah.
So
people come to me all the time saying, "Oh, you just wanted to have all your questions answered, and you're mad because God didn't answer all your questions." I'm like, you don't understand. I don't have all the answers, and it's not that I wanted all the answers. I just didn't want to be walking around with answers that were incorrect. I'm fine saying we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, or we don't know. I'm fine with all the we don't knows. But don't tell me I have to go around saying we know things that we actually now know cannot be true.
Yes.
That's what I don't want. So,
you don't want to be, you want to be genuine in it.
I remember,
so having peace with no answers, like, I'm okay with that.
Having peace. Wow, I love it. Having peace with no answers. The pressure of having to have the answers just being gone, and being able to accept this is just where we are in our development as a species. This is where we are right now. I remember being, to your point about accepting people and loving people. Shortly after my deconversion, I was at a cookout. My cousin's husband threw a cookout. And I'm there. The only people I know there is my cousin and her husband. And I'm standing around, drinking. He hired a bartender to come to the crib. And so I'm sitting there drinking and, just talking with these people. And at some point I realized, I don't know if they were non-believers. They probably were. I just assumed, because no one was bringing up anything religious. But I just remember saying, I'm probably standing here with 3 other non-believers. And we're talking about education, what young people need today in terms of mentoring. We're talking about hip hop. We're talking about, and I said, there's no pressure to witness to these guys. And I've got no ulterior motive.
Yeah.
Like, just to have no ulterior motive and just be human in a conversation was one of it was
Yes.
one of the first times since I was a teen. Since I was a
Mhm.
teen that I had that. So
Yeah.
wow, this is what it's like just to be normal.
You take
It's
like the
amazing.
double dutch out of it.
Right.
Of like when
Yeah, trying to figure out how
you're
do you
just
get
like
into this.
like every conversation is just a oh,
Right.
you're just waiting to jump in. And yeah.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
relate.
wow. Wow. You've said so much that I think will be helpful to so many people. Anything worth like you feel like, let me at least just get this one last point in just about how you look back at your former life, how you look at life now. Um,
Mhm.
like, will you be, do you think you'll be a vocal part of the, I guess, the community of people that's letting other people know, hey, this thing that we believe is not true? Like, do you speak about that? Are you an evangelist for unbelief?
So I'm very much the same now that I was beforehand, right? So I
Mm,
think that's one thing that you talked about, and people have asked you, well, why are you like this now?
mm,
You're the same person. I'm the same
mm,
person. So before, I would say that I was someone who did a lot of talking one on one, like
mm,
a small kind of groups. And I've done a lot of that and will continue to do that. I wasn't
mm,
someone who was really like on stage and kind of being
mm,
like, or on the street kind of shouting. So I'm not really like a shouter, like, this
mm,
is what you need to believe now or whatever.
mm,
But I've always, I'm still very passionate about
mm,
helping people, about serving, um, just with a different purpose, I guess.
mm,
And so what's interesting is that I talk to a lot of people one on one, like
mm,
I always have, but it's just different, and they know. Like there are
mm,
people. If you have had a conversation with me since
mm,
then, you know there hasn't been
mm,
any hiding it whatsoever.
mm,
People that have spoken to me, um, it is a part of the conversation.
mm,
Anyone that hasn't spoken to me directly, this is going to be a surprise to them and it's going to be
mm,
new. Although not a complete surprise, because there are certain people that I spoke to, they're like, oh, yeah, so and so already told me, or so and so. It's
mm,
like it kind of gets put out
mm,
there, which is very interesting because you would think the first thing that a lot of people would do if they hear something like that is to pick up the phone and say, hey, what's
mhm,
going on? But
mm,
I think that also speaks to how scary it is when you're a
mm.
believer. And it's like, like, it's almost like, is it contagious? It's that you have to protect
Mm,
yourself, right? And
yeah,
so, and
yeah.
I've done that. I remember doing that as a believer, right? It's like, I need to
Mm,
make sure I protect
mm,
myself because any little thing can kind of,
yeah.
so, but people are struggling. Like there are people
Mm,
that are struggling. I've spoken to,
mm,
I would say, this is difficult to say, or I don't know how to say it really, but I, I'll just say almost every woman that I have spoken to that
mm,
um, that is married and
mhm,
is a believer is struggling
mm.
uh, quite a bit,
Struggling
and
with belief, or is that what you mean? Or
not with belief, with being in their marriages. Basically,
oh, wow.
if given the choice, they would not be,
Mm,
but it's not an option. They don't feel that it is an
wow.
option for them, um,
Mm,
which is a big deal.
mhm,
And obviously, I can't say that that's all. I'm talking about a very small sample size. I'm not trying to
mm,
project that onto everything, but um, I just love
mm,
uh, having relationships with other
mm,
women, and I've
mm,
always loved that, and I will continue to want to have that. And
mm,
I always get excited when I meet new like moms and stuff, and I have
mm,
going out with someone on Tuesday, and I'm so excited. It's our first time, and
mm,
so I just love developing those friendships
mhm,
and just seeking ways to just still use my time, whatever
mhm,
time I have here, to really just help other people.
mm,
Um, and and that's kind of, so a lot of that hasn't changed in
mhm.
that sense. It's just different, and it looks a little different because I'm doing more things for myself too.
Gotcha,
That's been a huge change.
gotcha.
um, and I've kind of slowly, and the guilt still kind of rises every now and then,
Mm,
because like, should I be thinking about myself? But
mm,
I'm allowing myself and giving
Mhm.
myself permission to say, no, like if you want to do something, or if this
Mhm.
is what you want, then you should do it. And it's
Right.
okay. It's okay to have certain things for yourself that isn't serving someone else directly.
Mm.
And that's a huge mind shift
Right.
change for me, of like, oh, I can do stuff for me that doesn't have a
Mhm.
direct effect on someone else.
Mm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's not indirectly hurting them, there's
Of course.
there's no
Yes.
issue there. Um, when you say
Yes.
helping other women, I guess I still want to drill down on that a little bit. Does any of
Mhm.
the help that you offer, that you want to give, include you addressing not just your unbelief, but maybe the the, the invalidness of
Mhm.
belief in the first place? Like, are you vocal about, or are you active in maybe helping others
Mhm.
deconstruct?
It's talked about. Yeah,
Okay.
it is talked about. But I don't push,
Hmm.
and but I wasn't a pusher before. Does that make
Gotcha.
sense? I
Yep.
wasn't someone. I've had conversations even beforehand where it was always talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I always shared what I believed. And I shared also ways like that I think that kind of point out, well, you're saying this, and kind of, but I was never pushing as like, well, but if you don't believe this and this, and you need to believe this, you need to believe this, if they weren't. I was very clear about, well, I'm pretty sure this is what it is. And I was maybe a little even more black and white then, of like, but this is what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's more of, yeah, I'm very open about talking about what I
Mm-hmm.
think, what I believe. I don't hide that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like we've had conversations
Mm-hmm.
before today where I'm very open about
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Maybe a little too open, like about just what I think about everything, and kind of, but I've kind of am that way where I'm just,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think it's important. I think it's important, for them to know, and they can take it or leave it, right? And they can kind of do what they want with it. And because people have to decide these things for themselves, they have to
Yep.
be, you can give someone information, but everyone has their own process,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that. And so just like it is on the other side, like there's a process that takes place, um, because it's a big deal. And
Yeah.
so everyone has a different way that they kind of go through the process of believing what it is that they
Mm-hmm.
believe, and maybe changing what they believe. So, but it's
Yeah.
open, but they know that they can talk to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that I can kind of be non-judgmental, I guess, and just
Mm-hmm.
kind of, um, open. And I just think it's important. I know I talk specifically about women, but it's just so important
Yeah.
for just, for us to be able to feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
just to be able to feel safe with ourselves and with our thoughts and feelings and all that.
Yeah.
Because there are so many women that just don't feel safe in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of what my focus is. And that's the focus of, what the volunteer work that I started doing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to continue to do. So,
Well, I wish you all the best, and success in whatever your heart desires, and whatever you set yourself to. No, seriously.
no,
Like I
I
said,
know. I was just
we're at
thinking of
this.
my sinful heart.
um,
Mhm.
yeah. Like I said, I think there's so much here that will be helpful for so many people. So I can only imagine what the comments will be. Um, I need to get more women on to the channel to talk about these things, because it's opening my eyes just to the other side
Mhm.
of just certain struggles and certain experiences in life. So
Mhm.
thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Brady. Thanks for
Yep,
having me. This is fun.
indeed, indeed.
Wish.
You might want to swing back by some time and check out the comments and see what people are saying. Uh, you might find some people that you could, you know, give some of that help to in the comments.
Yeah, that would be. I'm more than willing to meet new people. I always love that. Yeah. So
Cool.
um, that would be nice. Any
All
other
right.
comment that isn't nice, just like don't leave it, please. I'm fragile.
We get to blocking and deleting pretty swiftly. So nah,
Yeah.
but hey, much love to you. I'm gonna let you go and get on with the rest of your day. Or matter of
Mhm.
fact, hang around for a minute after I end this, and we can wrap
Okay.
up there. But thanks to you all for watching. I never say this, so I'm going to say it now. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you check us out for more content.